If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 126. Chapter 126, Assessment. Upon hearing that Charles intended to conduct a graduation exam for Naruto, Irika was taken aback for a moment. He glanced at the forehead protector in Charles's hand and decided not to say much. After breakfast, while everyone was still in the dining area, the gang leader of the Belarusian gang approached Charles respectfully. She greeted him, "Elder Charles, I hope you were satisfied with this morning's breakfast." Charles glanced around at the others and replied, "It was quite good, thank you." The gang leader smiled even more at Charles's response and handed him a box containing 6 new cell phones. "Elder Charles, your phones were damaged during yesterday's attack. These are new phones I've prepared for you." Charles took one of the unopened phones and thanked her. He then instructed him, "Please distribute the rest of the phones to the others." She followed his orders and handed out the phones to the remaining people under Charles. She then asked respectfully, "Elder Charles, do you have any further instructions? If you don't have other plans, I've organized a ballet performance for you," the gang leader added. Hearing this, Charles glanced at her and said, "We can skip the ballet performance. Instead, bring the 10 strongest fighters you have to the stage. I want to conduct an assessment for one of our students." The gang leader nodded and replied promptly, "I'll arrange it immediately." Charles retrieved his damaged but still functional phone from his storage ring, removed the SIM card, and inserted it into one of the new phones. He watched as the gang leader left to prepare for the assessment. Once she was gone, Charles stood up and addressed the group. "Now that everyone has had breakfast, let's proceed with Naruto's assessment. If he passes, I'll reward him with the genin headband." With that, he led the group to the stage area of the opera house. Irika approached Charles and asked, "Lord Charles, how do you plan to assess Naruto? Testing him against these ordinary civilians might not yield meaningful results." Charles smiled and replied, "Irika, I remember the graduation exam from the Ninja Academy often involved mastering the clone jutsu, right? I believe Naruto will easily pass that test. However, I want him to understand the abilities of ordinary people in this world. Don't worry, we'll be here to ensure their safety." Hearing Charles's explanation, Irika nodded in agreement. Indeed, the Ninja Academy's graduation exam often required mastering the clone jutsu. He also had confidence in Naruto's abilities. As they reached the stage area, Charles addressed Naruto, explaining the assessment. "Naruto, you'll face 10 warriors in this assessment. Your goal is to defeat them without causing serious harm. Your performance will be graded based on how quickly you defeat them." Naruto listened attentively, ready to take on the challenge. After hearing Charles's assessment task, Naruto's face lit up with excitement. For him, tasks involving transformation and clone jutsu were relatively hard. "Don't worry, Lord Charles. I'll definitely defeat them all and come in first." Having given Naruto his instructions, Charles waited for the assessment to begin. Suddenly, his phone rang, and Charles answered it promptly. "Hi, Ginny. Boss, are you okay? I received news that the agency and the Continental Hotel were both attacked in the early morning." Hearing Ginny's concerned tone over the phone, Charles smiled and replied, "Ginny, you have to trust your boss. How could those enemies harm us? The enemies have all been eliminated, and apart from significant casualties at the Continental Hotel, we're all fine. However, when you return, there will be a big task at hand. The agency has been reduced to ruins, and I need you to organize manpower and start rebuilding immediately." Ginny's anxiety lessened upon hearing that everyone on their side was unharmed. Although she trusted Charles and the team's abilities, the news of significant losses at the Continental Hotel and the ruined agency still concerned her. "Understood, boss. I've met with Wesley, and we'll rush back together when it's time. As for rebuilding the agency, I'll arrange for manpower immediately and start the initial cleanup. We can discuss the specifics once I return." Charles had no objections to Ginny's arrangements, and he trusted her to handle things efficiently. "Ginny, transfer 10 million to my account. I'll need it." "Of course, boss." After discussing things with Ginny, Charles hung up. Not long after, his phone rang again. This time, it was a call from an old acquaintance, Kingpin. "Charles, is everything okay on your end? It seems you've already learned about the attack I suffered last night, Kingpin." On the other end of the line, Kingpin looked at a photo on his desk showing Charles's agency reduced to ruins. "Old buddy, your actions keep getting bigger and bigger. This time, it's not just me who knows about the attack on you. I believe all the underground pariads in New York are aware by now. After all, your agency was quite clearly the scene of a fierce battle. Charles shrugged, there was no way to hide it, especially with the intense events of the previous night. His damaged agency was a testament to what had transpired. Kingpin, is there something specific you're calling about? Kingpin sighed and replied, well, old buddy, with your recent actions, I think it's time for us to accept your offer regarding the Japanese market. When the time comes, there will be a substantial reward waiting for you. Charles listened attentively, knowing that Kingpin was referring to their previous discussions about expanding into the Japanese market. Chapter 127, Unexpected, Bonus Chapter. After a brief conversation with Kingpin, Charles hung up the phone. On the other end, Kingpin leaned on his cane, looking out of the floor-to-ceiling window at the view of Hell's Kitchen. He couldn't help but realize the growing gap between himself and Charles. While he remained confined to Hell's Kitchen, Charles had continuously dismantled several organizations with centuries of history. This realization prompted Kingpin to make a decision: he would expand into the Japanese market and was already calculating what kind of gift he should give Charles to avoid appearing stingy. Once Charles ended the call, his phone continued to ring incessantly. His adjudicators, as well as leaders of other underground factions, called to express concern for his safety. Even Elder Markham, who was in the desert, representing the High Table, inquired if Charles needed any support or assistance. After dismissing all the calls, the leader of the Belarusian gang finally arrived with 10 burly men from the Belarusian mafia. After a brief bow, she asked, Elder, these are our finest 10 young men. How would you like them to assist? Charles observed the 10 men behind her and said, go to the stage and defeat one of our students here. You can use cold weapons. Upon hearing Charles's instructions, her men, dressed in matching black suits and armed with short knives, promptly ascended the stage. They appeared quite intimidating. Charles glanced at Naruto, who stood nearby, and said, Naruto, defeat all of them without killing anyone. That's your victory condition. Confident, Naruto replied, don't worry, Lord Charles. I'll defeat them quickly. With that, Naruto leaped to the center of the stage, about 6 meters away from him. The leader of the gang had been somewhat concerned about Naruto since he appeared to be just a child. She worried about what would happen if her men accidentally hurt him. However, when Naruto effortlessly covered the distance in a single leap, her concerns vanished. She understood that under the Elder's command, even a child who appeared to be only 6 or 7 years old possessed extraordinary strength. Seeing Naruto standing ready on the stage, Charles announced, the match begins. Following Charles's declaration, the 10 members of the Belarusian mafia immediately charged toward Naruto, brandishing their knives. In the audience, Irika had faith in Naruto's abilities but still felt some concern for his student. Naruto was not the most inattentive student before his graduation, and he had not yet mastered the 3 basic techniques, not to mention his poor control over chakra. If he were to get cut, he could still get injured. Meanwhile, Rock Lee was excitedly shouting, Naruto, do your best. Defeat them. Sasuke, on the other hand, found this assessment rather dull. A group of ordinary people without chakra, even if they knew some martial arts from this world, would not be a challenge for him. Seated next to Charles, Shizuan summoned Tauntaun and held the pig in her arms while watching Naruto's performance. On the stage, Naruto faced the charging group without any fear. In fact, he moved even faster than them. Naruto's speed was not impressive to the few ninja in the audience, and it might even seem slow to them. However, to the brutes on the stage, it was terrifying. In an instant, Naruto closed the gap between him and one of them, delivering a powerful punch that sent the burly man tumbling off the stage. Seeing Naruto's incredible strength, those nearer to him swung their knives. Bang! Instead of striking Naruto's body, their knives hit a substitution jutsu log, creating a sound akin to metal clashing. Naruto had immediately used the substitution jutsu to appear outside of the encirclement. Shadow Clone, Double Strike. In the next moment, another Naruto appeared on the stage, but this one immediately collapsed on the ground, appearing lifeless and convulsing for a couple of seconds. In the audience area. Ha ha ha. Seeing this scene, Charles, Shizuan, and Rock Lee couldn't help but burst into laughter. Charles even commented, truly an unexpected performance by Naruto Uzumaki. It's quite entertaining. Irika, sitting to Charles's right, felt somewhat embarrassed and said, Naruto still needs practice with the shadow clone technique, but at least he can use it. Only Sasuke remained unimpressed, wearing his usual cool expression. He muttered, this guy is such an idiot. The leader of the mafia was somewhat shocked by Naruto's performance, particularly the sudden appearance of the log and the lifelike clone. These abilities left her greatly surprised. Back on the stage, Naruto, having realized his failure in using the shadow clone technique, scratched his head in embarrassment. He immediately dispelled the clone and lay on the ground as the clone turned into a white mist and disappeared. At this point, the other 9 mafia members regained their composure and quickly turned to attack Naruto. Swish! One of the mafias threw his knife directly at Naruto. Naruto shouted and managed to dodge it, narrowly avoiding getting hit. The knife impaled itself into the edge of the stage. Prankster's art of oil. In the next second, Naruto pulled out a special bucket of paint from his ninja pouch and instantly splashed it toward the thugs in front of him. A large amount of paint flew out from Naruto's bucket at an incredible speed, crashing into the men in front of him and sending them crashing to the ground. Those on the sides and in the back of the stage were relatively unaffected, just slipping on the spilled paint. However, the 3 directly hit by the paint weren't so fortunate. Naruto's paint was a special concoction and, combined with his enhanced strength, was akin to a wall of water. It immediately knocked the 3 thugs straight off the stage, rendering them unconscious. The few who slipped on the paint struggled to get back on their feet, but their movements were slow and unstable due to the slippery surface. 3 of them managed to regain their footing and rushed toward Naruto, while the other 3 picked up the fallen knives from their unconscious comrades and joined the assault. Chapter 128, The Mafia Leader's Ambition. After watching the opponent's relatively slow movements, Naruto quickly defeated them. He knocked down one with a punch, another with a side kick, and then leaped into the air to deliver a roundhouse kick, toppling a third one. The mafia members couldn't withstand Naruto's powerful blows, and they groaned in pain as they hit the ground. Seeing that there were still 3 opponents remaining, Naruto swiftly regained his composure and formed hand seals. He was determined to successfully use the Shadow Clone Jutsu in front of everyone. Shadow Clone Jutsu, Double Strike. In an instant, another Naruto clone appeared in front of him. The clone delivered a side kick to one of the mafias, sending him flying into the air, and then the clone dissipated. Naruto performed a mid-air somersault and appeared above the second opponent. He executed a powerful whip kick, smashing the second into the first one. Bang! The mafia sent flying by Naruto's kick collided with the last opponent, knocking him down as well. Naruto landed gracefully and looked down at Charles with a proud smile on his face, as if to say, I did it. Charles applauded first, and the others quickly joined in, clapping their hands in approval. Clap, clap, clap. Naruto's smile grew even wider as he accepted their applause. He felt a bit embarrassed, thinking that his performance wasn't that great, but the encouragement meant a lot to him. Charles stood up and addressed Naruto, Naruto, you did well. Although you failed the Shadow Clone Jutsu on your first try, you successfully used it later. With your abilities, you're considered qualified here. Unspoken by Charles was the fact that even if Naruto hadn't graduated, there wouldn't have been a ninja academy for him to attend here. Hearing Charles's words, Naruto jumped over excitedly, shouting, yes, I graduated. I'm a ninja now. Come here, Naruto. Let me help you put on the forehead protector. Charles removed Naruto's goggles and replaced them with a ninja headband. There you go, kid. From now on, you're officially a ninja. On the sidelines, Shizune watched Charles's actions with a pensive expression but remained silent. Meanwhile, Irika's expression was somewhat complicated. It was the first time Charles had awarded a ninja headband to someone else. Although Charles had provided them with ninja gear, the significance of the headband was different. However, Irika didn't express any doubts about Charles's authority to appoint Leaf Village ninjas. He silently observed everything, as in his memory, Naruto had successfully graduated and obtained a ninja headband. Now, it seemed that all Naruto lacked was experience in the multi-shadow clone jutsu. The mafia leader, on the other hand, was focused intently on the proceedings. In her mind, she had a new idea as she remembered a few key words: ninja, ninja headband, and graduation. At this moment, the mafia leader contemplated sending her own child or the most promising members of her organization to be trained by Elder Charles. The astonishing performances of the 3 children around her had shown her the vast gap in abilities. It was like a comparison between heaven and earth. Even her 10 most skilled subordinates couldn't defeat a single child trained by Charles. This realization had a profound impact on her. She also understood why Charles Doyle, originally an assassin, had become an elder. Thinking back to those fools who believed Charles had paved the way for their promotions, the mafia leader shook her head in silent mockery. With his newly awarded headband, Naruto ran over to Sasuke to show off, proudly declaring himself a ninja. However, Sasuke quickly suppressed Naruto's enthusiasm by flicking him on the forehead. Seeing this scene, the others burst into laughter once again. Charles Doyle waved his hand and called the mafia leader over, instructing her, "Go measure this little guy's body size and make him some appropriate clothes." Charles felt that Naruto's current attire was too worn out and decided to get him a few sets of new clothes. Both Sasuke and Naruto had their own styles, and they preferred having their outfits tailored to match their previous attire. Following Charles's instructions, she took Naruto to the tailor to order some new clothes. After taking care of these matters, Charles Doyle and his group stayed at the mafia leader's opera house for 2 days, during which nothing significant happened. They didn't take on any missions and simply rested at the place. During these 2 days, Charles received 50,000 copper coins and 200 samsara stones as part of his daily login rewards. On the 3rd day, Charles received a message from Winston, informing him that the Continental Hotel had reopened for business. He promptly led his team to the Continental Hotel. As they disembarked from the Maybach and looked at the Continental Hotel in front of them, Charles couldn't help but admire the hotel's rapid reconstruction. In less than 3 days, the hotel had already reopened, which was quite impressive. "The construction speed in New York isn't as bad as I thought," Charles commented as he muttered to himself. Afterwards, he led his team into the Continental Hotel. Inside the hotel, Charles noticed that the person behind the service counter had changed. It was no longer the familiar black man, Karen, but rather Addie, the hotel bartender. Charles was a bit surprised and asked, "Addie, why are you here at the service counter instead of downstairs in the bar?" Addie's expression carried a hint of sadness as he replied, "Elder, Karen sacrificed himself." Hearing about Karen's sacrifice, Charles showed no particular emotions. Even though he was serving at the hotel's counter, Charles hadn't paid much attention to him. Karen had managed to continue working there even after he took over the New York Continental Hotel. It was a pity he couldn't escape the recent attack. "What about the manager?" Charles inquired. "Elder, the manager is in the process of cleaning up the meeting room. He is unaware of your arrival," Addie replied. Charles smiled and didn't blame Addie for not coming down to welcome him. Chapter 129, The Meeting. "All right, I understand," Charles replied. He led his team towards the meeting room upstairs. Addie immediately picked up the phone at the service desk and informed Winston, "Manager, the elder has arrived." Winston was in the meeting room inspecting the preparations, ensuring everything was in order. He had been informed by Charles earlier that there would be a meeting at the hotel's conference room in the afternoon. Irika held the door open for Charles, and the group of 6 entered the meeting room. Winston approached Charles and bowed slightly, respectfully saying, "Elder, the meeting room has been prepared and is ready for use." Charles examined the round table in front of him, nodded in approval, and then spoke, "Winston, did the previous attack affect the hotel's operation?" Winston stood to the side and answered respectfully, "The previous attack did not affect the hotel's operation. Thanks to the promotion of the wax baths by the elder, some of the injured personnel were able to recover quickly. However, there were still some casualties among the staff." Satisfied with Winston's response, Charles nodded and then spoke earnestly, "Since there were those who sacrificed their lives for the hotel during the battle, make sure to take care of the compensation for their families." "Elder, you can rest assured, the New York Continental Hotel provides excellent compensation for its staff," Winston assured him. Charles nodded again, checked the time on his watch, and said, "All right, there's nothing for you here at the moment. Please prepare dinner for us. After the meeting, the other adjudicators and I will have a banquet here." "Of course, I will make the arrangements." Winston respectfully left the meeting room and closed the door behind him. As soon as Winston left, Naruto couldn't sit still and began to explore the room. He was filled with curiosity about everything in this world. Even though he had spent 2 days at the theater and learned quite a few new things, his curiosity remained undiminished. Irika watched Naruto's behavior with a hint of helplessness and approached Charles, saying, "Lord Charles, for the meeting later, should we arrange for Naruto to visit the Continental Hotel?" Hearing Irika's suggestion, Charles smiled and then said, Naruto, later you can choose to either attend the meeting with everyone or explore the Continental Hotel. Naruto pondered for a moment, and then asked, Lord Charles, is this hotel yours too? Charles smiled and replied, yes, it's mine. I'll join the meeting with everyone. I can explore the hotel another time, Naruto decided. Iruka reminded him, Naruto, please don't cause any trouble during the meeting. Hearing Iruka's reminder, Naruto adjusted his headband and immediately retorted, Iruka-sensei, I'm no longer a student at the Ninja Academy. I'm a ninja now. You should trust a ninja. Seeing Naruto's earnest expression, Charles said, Iruka, now that Naruto is a ninja, you should learn to trust him. Seeing that Charles had no negative feelings towards Naruto and was even taking care of him, Iruka expressed his gratitude. Iruka's heart felt much lighter now. Ever since Naruto had arrived, Iruka had been worried about whether Naruto's mischief and immaturity would displease Charles. However, it seemed that everything was moving in a positive direction. Time quickly passed, and it was now afternoon. A Maybach led the way, followed by a business car, as they arrived outside the Continental Hotel. A doorman approached them and stood respectfully beside the Maybach's door. The car door opened, and John Wick, dressed in a sharp suit, stepped out. 4 enforcers followed him, one of them carrying a briefcase. As soon as John Wick walked into the hotel lobby, he saw Winston approaching. Winston reached John Wick and lightly hugged him, then said, The Elder is waiting for you in the upstairs meeting room. John Wick nodded and smiled, saying, I'm very happy to see you unharmed. After the meeting, we'll catch up at the banquet. After exchanging brief greetings, John Wick, accompanied by his team, proceeded to the meeting room upstairs. Upon seeing John Wick leave, Winston didn't linger in the hotel. Instead, he went to the hotel entrance to welcome the other adjudicator arrivals. Winston didn't have to wait long at the entrance. A Rolls-Royce and a business Mercedes soon arrived. The car doors opened, and Cross stepped out, who is in charge of the London Continental Hotel, accompanied by several of his subordinates, each carrying a suitcase. Winston walked up to the Cross and greeted him, Welcome, Lord Adjudicator. The Elder is in the hotel's meeting room, waiting for you, Winston informed. Cross and Winston shook hands briefly, and the Cross replied, I understand. Thank you for your efforts, Winston. After a brief exchange, Cross, with his entourage, entered the Continental Hotel. The adjudicator responsible for the Moscow Continental Hotel, Wesley, had not arrived yet. Inside a stretched Bentley, Ginny looked at Wesley and the Russian brute beside him. She spoke, Ivan Vanko, for your father, I have arranged for the best local medical staff to provide treatment. So when we meet our boss later, I hope you'll behave well. Don't waste Wesley's efforts. Although you do have some talent in mechanics, you should understand that you're not irreplaceable. Ivan Vanko looked at the woman in front of him, frowning slightly, and then spoke, If you want to recruit me, you should trust my abilities. Hearing his words, Ginny's expression turned serious as she responded, Ivan Vanko, we're not here to recruit you. Wesley recommended you to our boss. Our boss is only giving you an opportunity to meet him. Whether you accept it is still uncertain. As for whether you take this matter seriously, that's up to you. Of course, if you still want to live a destitute life and remain unrecognized, with your talents going to waste, we won't stop you. You should understand that our power is far beyond what you can imagine. Thinking about the government's restrictions placed on him and his father, Ivan Vanko remained silent. He had long wanted to leave that wretched place. This time, he wanted to break free from the restrictions and see what Howard Stark, the man responsible for their miserable lives, was up to. Although Howard was no longer alive, there was still Tony Stark and their company, Stark Industries. Comment. 3. Comment. Vote. Chapter 130, Chapter 130, Performance Appraisal, Bonus Chapter. After giving Ivan Vanko a few instructions, Ginny and her group also successfully arrived at the doorstep of the New York Continental Hotel. A doorman opened the car door, and Ginny was the first to step out. Wesley and Ivan Vanko followed suit. Winston noticed that Ginny had arrived in those 2 cars. He was a bit surprised, thinking, no wonder I didn't see this secretary earlier. Secretary Ginny, Lord Adjudicators, the Elder is waiting for you in the upstairs meeting room. Ginny didn't immediately lead the group inside but said, Winston, please help me arrange Ivan Vanko for now. I'll send you a message later. Can you take him to the meeting room? Ivan Vanko stepped closer and extended his hand for a handshake. "Hello, I'm Ivan Vanko." Winston looked at the rugged Russian brute in front of him, shook his hand briefly, and said, "Hello, I'm the hotel manager." After temporarily arranging Ivan Vanko with Winston, Ginny, and Wesley, along with their entourage, proceeded directly to the hotel's meeting room. Winston, seeing that all the adjudicators under Charles had arrived, did not wait at the hotel's entrance and entered the hotel. "Mr. Ivan Vanko, please follow me to the lounge for now." In the meeting room, Charles sat in the first seat. On his left were the 5 ninjas, with seats assigned to Shizuan, Irika, Rock Lee, Uchiha Suzuki, and Naruto Uzumaki. Originally, Irika was supposed to sit in the first seat, but he felt that his strength was not on par with Shizuan, so he invited Shizuan to sit in the first seat. On the right side were Ginny, who took the lead, and her group. They included John Wick, Cross, Wesley, and each of them had 4 subordinates standing behind them. After Ginny entered, she noticed one more child wearing a ninja headband, and her anxiety increased. However, she didn't immediately inquire about Naruto's background. She wasn't about to underestimate him because he appeared to be a 7 or 8-year-old child. After all, she had witnessed the power of Suzuki and Rock Lee. Charles saw that everyone had taken their seats, so he began the meeting without further delay. He first turned his gaze toward John Wick and said, "John, you're responsible for the Moroccan Continental Hotel. Tell us about your progress there." Hearing the elder single him out to report first, John Wick opened his notebook and began reporting, "Elder, I'm in charge of the Moroccan Continental Hotel's recovery room. Over the past month, we've successfully promoted the reputation of the recovery room in Morocco. It has gained considerable recognition locally. Currently, the recovery room isn't just used by the Continental Hotel's assassins. Some individuals who have been injured for other reasons also come to our hotel's recovery room for physical repair. Due to the pricing of the recovery room, which is set at 2 gold coins plus $100,000, we've received 180 visitors in the past month. On average, each visitor pays around. After deducting the hotel's share of the gold coins, we've made a total profit of 180 gold coins and $1.8 million, John Wick reported. Due to the presence of the recovery room, the overall business at the Moroccan Continental Hotel has grown by 10% compared to before. Many assassins from other cities come to Morocco for treatment after being injured. After his report, John Wick placed a suitcase on the table and opened it. Inside were 180 gold coins and a bank card. Charles observed the gleaming gold coins and the bank card in the box, nodded, and said, "Hand everything over to Secretary Ginny for processing." Upon hearing this, John Wick closed the suitcase and placed it next to Ginny. Charles then inquired about the upcoming move, stating, "I'm planning to reassign you. As for the profits, you can receive them once a month. You can assign the operation of the recovery room to your subordinates." Without displaying any emotions upon hearing about the reassignment, John Wick calmly replied, "I'll follow the elder's orders." After John Wick's profit report, Cross, Wesley, and Irika, who was responsible for coordinating with the New York Continental Hotel, each reported on their respective areas. The London Continental Hotel brought in 150 gold coins and $1.5 million. The Moscow Continental Hotel earned 160 gold coins and $1.6 million. The New York Continental Hotel made 210 gold coins and $2.1 million. The recovery rooms in the 4 Continental Hotels directly generated a total income of 700 gold coins and $7 million for Charles. For Charles, gold coins weren't crucial, as he had facilities under his control to mint gold coins. He could mint as many as he wished. However, he was very satisfied with the $7 million that had been deposited. Charles also recognized that 7 million wasn't a fixed value, and the specific income would fluctuate perhaps more or less depending on the development of each market. After listening to the reports from his subordinates, Charles spoke, "John Wick, Cross, Wesley, starting today, you'll be reassigned to New York. You'll still be in charge of the recovery rooms you've previously managed, but you won't need to be stationed at the hotels. Just coordinate with them once a month to receive the profits." "Understood, Elder Charles." They replied. Once the profit reports were finished, Charles mentioned some plans for base construction, agency reconstruction, and the recruitment of security personnel. Then, he concluded this performance appraisal meeting. Ginny spoke up, "Boss, that mechanic Wesley recommended is here. Would you like to meet him now?" Charles, surprised that Ivan Vanko was brought in by Ginny. Nevertheless, since he was here, Charles said, in that case, Ginny, please have him come in. Instead of asking everyone else to leave the room, Charles decided that everyone in the meeting room should meet the future Whiplash Ivan Vanko. Ginny took out her phone, sent a text message to Winston, and informed him to bring Ivan Vanko in. Winston, who was chatting with Ivan Vanko in the rest area, noticed the message on his phone. He told Ivan Vanko, "The elder wants to see you now. Follow me." Chapter 131, Top Talent. The meeting room's door swung open, and a bearded Russian man with long hair entered. As Ivan Vanko walked into the meeting room, his eyes scanned the people inside. He noticed a group of predominantly Caucasian individuals on one side of the round table and an entirely Asian group on the other side. What caught his attention, even more, were the 3 children present among the Asians, which raised his eyebrows. Charles looked at the new arrival and began, "Ivan Vanko, your father, Anton Vanko, once collaborated with Howard Stark many years ago in the invention of the original arc reactor technology. They had different opinions on how to use this new technology. Anton wanted to use it for military and industrial development to make money, while Howard wanted to use the new technology to benefit humanity. Subsequently, Anton was expelled for some reason, returning to the Soviet Union, where he has been confined under charges of treason. He remains unable to leave or pursue research. Your talent is said to be in mechanics. What can you offer to us, and what can I offer you in return?" Ivan Vanko, having heard about the high-level meeting while coming over, wasn't surprised by the presence of the individuals in the room. However, seeing 3 children in the meeting caught him off guard. When he heard Charles, he immediately responded, "Howard is a fraud. He and my father were responsible for the research, but after they achieved results, he expelled my father. This is unfair to us." Charles didn't pay much attention to Ivan Vanko's defense. It was unlikely that someone who had been indoctrinated with his father's beliefs from a young age would readily accept the truth. Moreover, Charles had no concrete evidence of what happened, only knowing the cause and effect of the situation. "Ivan Vanko, answer my question. What do you want, and what can you bring to me?" Ivan Vanko felt a growing frustration when he realized that Charles wasn't interested in his explanations. He wanted to tell him how Howard had taken his father's research and later suppressed their family. But in the end, he suppressed his impulses and replied, "I need a laboratory and funding for my research. I want to prove to the world that the Vanko family is not inferior to the Stark family. Sir, could you provide a computer? I would like to showcase my research through it." Hearing that Ivan Vanko needed a computer, Ginny immediately led him to the operation area of the meeting room, where there was a computer connected to the electronic screen. Ivan Vanko quickly plugged his hard drive into the computer, opened a PowerPoint presentation, and began his presentation. The presentation featured one key item, the massive arc reactor. Ivan Vanko passionately discussed the power supply, clean energy, and potential future applications of this technology. He talked about the arc reactor's potential without being aware of the appearance of Iron Man. So, he had never thought about making a smaller version of it, as he hadn't succeeded in even creating a full-sized one yet. However, the confidence in his abilities shone as he passionately explained the power supply, clean energy, and future prospects of the arc reactor technology. He talked about its potential in extra details. Charles didn't interrupt him but listened to his presentation attentively. When Ivan finished, Charles asked a critical question, "I've visited Stark Industries and have knowledge of this technology. If you want to use it for commercial purposes, have you considered the issue of patents?" The mention of patents left Ivan Vanko momentarily speechless. While this project was initially his father's and Howard Stark's joint research, his family had no patent rights. Charles continued to criticize his project, "Furthermore, your technology is outdated." Upon hearing that his technology was considered outdated, Ivan Vanko couldn't contain his frustration, exclaiming, "That's impossible. Absolutely impossible. When I did some research before coming here, I found that Stark Industries hasn't made any breakthroughs in this technology for decades." However, this time, Ivan Vanko's emotional outburst didn't affect Charles, who casually responded, "Ivan Vanko, if it's just this technology, I'm sorry, but I'm not interested." For Charles, something that couldn't be profitable, even if it involved Mark II, Mark III armor production, wasn't worth his attention. He was after money, US dollars that could be exchanged for copper coins, and items that could be recharged. Ivan Vanko recognized that he didn't have anything to offer right now and pondered for a moment before speaking, "Sir, while I may not have other scientific achievements at the moment, I believe that, given the chance, I can provide you with what you desire. When Charles asked about the possibility of developing artificial intelligence, Ivan Vanko was at a loss. He responded, "Sir, I excel in mechanical engineering, and I haven't dabbled in artificial intelligence." Hearing Ivan Vanko's admission of his lack of expertise in artificial intelligence, Charles was somewhat disappointed. He would have liked to have a full-fledged artificial intelligence system like JARVIS at his disposal. It would have allowed him to keep a closer eye on this troublemaker's activities. Disappointed, Charles said, "Wesley, give him some money. Let's not have Mr. Ivan Vanko's trip be in vain." With Charles's rejection and his monetary compensation, Ivan Vanko had to leave the meeting room. Wesley apologized and led him away. As Ivan Vanko exited, Charles continued, "If anyone wishes to recommend candidates to join us, it's welcome. We have many positions available, such as high-table messengers for combat, positions in the hotel's weapon and equipment research department, and medical roles." However, Charles clarified the requirements for entry into the meeting room. "To be a part of this room, you must have skills that meet my standards." Charles emphasized the need for top talents, whether in combat, technology, or any other field. Even Wesley and Cross had the ability to initiate bullet time, run across 2 large buildings, and they were no less skilled than Hawkeye. Chapter 132, Bodyguard. After emphasizing the criteria for recommending candidates and the positions available, Charles concluded the meeting. During the post-meeting dinner, Ginny prepared Uzumaki Naruto's identity information. At the banquet, Ginny inquired about Naruto's information from Sasuke and Lee. When she learned of Naruto's abilities, Ginny was greatly impressed. She initially wanted to bring a mechanical engineer into the fold to bolster her team, but the boss didn't seem interested. This left Ginny somewhat at a loss, but she still focused on her upcoming work, rebuilding the agency and establishing the base. On the other hand, Tony Stark was conducting flight tests of his latest invention. 3, 2, 1. As the thrusters fired up, Tony was propelled outward and seemed destined to collide with the laboratory wall. Just when it appeared to be a near-certain crash, Parker suddenly darted out and blocked Tony from crashing into the wall, saving him from a painful impact. However, Tony still crashed on the ground. Parker's quick reflexes prevented a collision, but he couldn't catch Tony mid-air since he has no hands. Regardless, Tony managed to avoid a full-on impact with the wall. Despite the hard landing, Tony was grateful. "Thanks, Parker." Parker, hanging upside down on the wall, replied, "No problem. My job is to protect you." Once Tony was back on his feet, he resumed his work. He had been focusing on perfecting the propulsion system and believed it needed to combine both foot-based thrust and handheld stabilization. Meanwhile, Pepper Potts arrived at Tony's underground lab. She put the passcode and entered, holding a magazine, a small box, and a cup of coffee. "I've been calling you for a while, didn't you hear?" Pepper questioned as she entered. Tony was occupied with his work and replied, "What did you say?" Leaving her things on a nearby table, Pepper responded, "Obadiah is upstairs." Upon hearing that, Tony promptly replied, all right. I'll be up there in a moment." As she left his workstation, Pepper asked, "What should I tell him?" Tony donned the mechanical arm he had just built. Seeing Tony's new invention, Pepper said, "I remember you saying you wouldn't make weapons anymore." Tony explained, "That's right, this isn't a weapon. This is a flight stabilizer. It won't hurt anyone." He then activated it with a sound. A loud bang echoed through the lab as Tony was propelled backward. He was about to crash into the wall once again, but this time, Parker was there to stop him in mid-air. The mechanical arm stabilized Tony as it reacted to the force of its propulsion. It prevented him from colliding with the wall but didn't avoid a rough landing. Seeing that Tony was blocked by a dog, Pepper exclaimed, "Tony, when did you get a pet?" Tony apologized, "Sorry, I didn't anticipate this." Pepper, covering her ears due to the noise, inquired, "How did you suddenly become a dog owner?" Clearly, Pepper Potts had no idea that Parker existed. This was her first encounter with him. Parker remained silent, and apart from his current employer, Tony Stark, he had never displayed his speaking ability in front of anyone. Noticing Parker's silence, Tony explained, "Pepper, this isn't my pet, he's my partner and bodyguard." "Bodyguard?" Pepper Potts exclaimed. She immediately thought of how Happy had been replaced by a dog, wondering if he would be heartbroken when he found out. However, considering Parker's impressive performance moments ago, Pepper was curious. She asked, "Is this your mechanical dog that you've developed? It looks remarkably like a real pet." Tony, understanding her confusion, clarified, "Pepper, he's not a mechanical dog. His name is Parker, and he's quite remarkable." "Parker, Pepper is one of us, you can speak to her, she won't reveal your existence." Responding to his employer's request, Parker glanced at Tony and then at Pepper Potts. He then spoke, "Hello, Miss Pepper Potts, I'm the ninja dog, Parker." Pepper Potts was taken aback by this sudden revelation. She looked at Tony and asked, "You said it wasn't a mechanical dog, yet it can talk. Is JARVIS controlling it?" In the basement, J.A.R.V.I.S.'s voice responded, "Miss Pepper Potts, Parker is a ninja dog with the ability to speak. He is not a mechanical dog, and I am not controlling him. He is a naturally evolved life form." Upon hearing J.A.R.V.I.S.'s explanation, Pepper exclaimed in amazement, "Tony, he can really talk. This is so unbelievable." Parker, who was lying on the ground, felt somewhat resigned. Every time he encountered humans in this world, it was always the same reaction. He had grown accustomed to it. Tony shrugged and spread his hands, saying, "This is Charles Doyle's ninja dog. You asked him to save me, but you didn't know about his abilities." "Wow!" Pepper Potts held her hand to her mouth, displaying a bewildered expression. This was way beyond her comprehension. However, Pepper quickly composed herself and said, "Tony, I'll go ahead. Please come upstairs once you're ready, Obadiah has been waiting upstairs for a while." "Okay." After watching Pepper leave, Tony began to tidy up his lab and took off his mechanical arm. He then headed upstairs with Parker. As they ascended from the underground lab, upon reaching the top of the stairs, Tony spotted Obadiah playing the piano. "How's it going?" Tony approached the sofa where Pepper was seated. He noticed she was checking the company's stock prices on her tablet. He commented, "It doesn't look too good from the looks of it." Obadiah looked at Tony and said, "It might get better if you go in person." Tony took a slice of pizza brought by Obadiah and tossed it to Parker, who was right beside him, and retrieved another slice from the box for him. He took a bite and turned to Obadiah, saying, "You told me to keep a low profile, and I've been following that. You're in charge of everything." Obadiah gazed at Tony's sidekick, Parker, for a moment with a hint of surprise. However, he didn't dwell on it too much and walked over to Tony. Then he spoke, "I meant in front of the general public and the media." Chapter 133, Soaring Net Worth. Obadiah, holding a glass of wine, looked at Tony and said, "But this time, it's the board of directors." "This time?" Tony was surprised. "You mean they are having a board meeting?" Obadiah stood next to Tony and looked at him seriously. "The board of directors has announced that you suffer from post-concussion syndrome. They are applying for a restraining order." Tony was taken aback. "What kind of restraining order?" "A restraining order to stop you from working." Tony was somewhat displeased. "Why?" "Just because the stock dropped 40 points. That was within our expectations." Pepper Potts, who was sitting nearby, looked at Tony and said expressionlessly, "It dropped $56.50 per share." Upon hearing Pepper Potts's words, Tony immediately turned to her and said, "What does it matter? We have controlling shares in the company." Pepper Potts looked at Tony stark without expression. Obadiah replied, "Tony, the board of directors has its rights. They believe that you and your new ideas do not align with the company's best interests." Tony wiped his mouth with a towel and then raised his voice. "In that case, I'll take the responsibility. For me and the company, it's a new beginning." Upon hearing Tony's words, Obadiah immediately smiled, while Pepper Potts was somewhat shocked by Tony's statement. Tony looked at both of them and said, "To be honest, the company should be the one to take responsibility." Tony Stark didn't want to dwell on this topic any longer and said to Obadiah, "The pizza tastes great." He then picked up the pizza box from the table and prepared to leave. Obadiah quickly tried to stop him. "Don't go, hey, Tony, Tony." Tony got up from the sofa, looking at the two of them. "I'm going to the lab." Parker, who was lying nearby, had already finished the pizza. He immediately followed Tony as he got up. Hey, Tony." Obadiah got up to intercept Tony. "Listen to me, I'll try to turn the situation around. But you need to take action so that I can convince them. Obadiah pointed to the miniature arc reactor on Tony's chest. I took that to have the engineers analyze it and establish the technical specifications. Tony immediately refused. No, no. Obadiah continued, I can use it to whet the appetite of the board of directors. Tony refused again, absolutely not. This belongs only to me. No discussion, Obadiah, end of story. Seeing Tony's firm refusal, Obadiah took the pizza box from Tony's hand and said, well, then, but this belongs to me. Seeing Tony reaching for the pizza, Obadiah opened the box and said, okay, you can take a slice. Tony took 2 slices of pizza and said, 2 slices, thank you. He then proceeded to walk to the underground laboratory with Parker. Obadiah called after Tony, can I go down to see your work? Accelerating his pace downstairs, Tony refused, good night, Obadiah. On the other side, Ivan Vanko, leaving the Continental Hotel in New York, glanced back at the hotel behind him and did not linger in the city. He was going back to take care of his seriously ill father. Since he didn't get Charles Doyle's acceptance, he knew that the corresponding medical care would soon come to an end. But Ivan Vanko had a fire burning inside him. If you look down on me, then in the future, I will make you understand what you've lost. Time passed, and quickly 10 days went by. During this period, Ginny had followed Charles Doyle's instructions and sold all of Stark Industries' shorts, making nearly $2 billion in profits without using leverage. Charles's assets had directly reached $3 billion in cash, along with $400 million in fixed assets and $600 million in stocks. Charles Doyle's net worth had directly inflated to $4 billion. After reserving $500 million in cash, Ginny once again scattered the $2.5 billion in cash through bulk trades and other channels in the secondary market. At this time, because Stark Industries was a listed company and the wealth of 2008 had not yet inflated so much, Tony Stark's net worth was only $12.4 billion, while Stark Industries was valued at $25 billion. But even with $2.5 billion in cash, Ginny could not guarantee acquiring 10% of the shares in Stark Industries, even though the company's stock had dropped 40 points, from $142 per share to $. However, a large number of buy orders would still push up the shares of Stark Industries, and Ginny also felt that it was not just her, other institutions were secretly acquiring shares of Stark Industries as well. Apart from holding shares in Stark Industries as requested by Charles, during this time, Ginny had also reconstructed the original Charles Doyle agency. After spending a certain amount of money, she acquired several undamaged houses next to the agency as a temporary foothold. The construction of the agency's original site was in full swing, and the sign of the Charles Doyle agency had already been hung up in the temporary residence next door, starting normal operations. During these 10 days, Charles had earned 2 ninjutsu scrolls, 200 ninja gems, 50 delicious ramen, 500 reputation, 200 reincarnation stones, 80,000 copper coins, 3 ninjutsu scrolls, 600 reputation, 50 delicious ramen, and 800 reputation through system check-ins. In the agency, Charles was sitting on the sofa in the hall, looking at the newspaper in his hand. It stated that Tony Stark was suspected of having post-concussion syndrome and had been suspended from all work. At this moment, Ginny came downstairs from the second floor, holding several folders in her hand. Boss, I have selected some personnel and plan to transfer them to the agency to start work tomorrow, mainly including the tasks of the agency's doorman, security, task reception at the service desk, as well as chefs and service staff in the dining area. Do you want to review these? Looking at the folders in Ginny's hand and the many positions mentioned, Charles refused. Ginny, I trust you with these service staff. I won't look at their information. But we don't need too many security personnel for the agency. Arrange 1 or 2 for the main entrance. Boss, I have selected 2 security personnel responsible for the agency's main entrance. Obviously, not only Charles but also Ginny understood that the security here was just for show. The people here didn't need their protection. Chapter 134, Ninjutsu Scrolls, Bonus Chapter. Seeing that Charles had no intention of looking at this personnel information, Ginny didn't insist. She continued, Boss, I have purchased shares of Stark Industries as per your request. Also, the piece of land from Hell's Kitchen has already been declared for the orphanage. When the declaration comes through, you will need to attend the ceremony. Also, in terms of charitable tax avoidance, there will be a charity press conference, and we need you to attend. Listening to Ginny talking about tax avoidance, Charles inexplicably felt sorry. Even though it was for charity tax avoidance, this was still a substantial amount. With his current income, it was likely that the tax he paid this year might not be less than 300 to 500 million. Wasn't this money better used to upgrade his equipment? Unfortunately, Charles wanted to be a good citizen who paid taxes regularly. After all, his assets were indeed not low. Ginny, you handle it. Notify me in advance when I need to show up. Seeing that his boss trusted her so much, Ginny happily left with the documents. She had other things to communicate. Seeing Ginny leave, Charles put down the newspaper in his hand and returned to his room. At this time, Sasuke and Lee took Naruto to carry out a mission. The other 3 adjudicators under Charles were not idle either. They all went to take charge of selecting the high table envoys. After all, a lot of manpower would be needed after the base was built. Back in the room, Charles's consciousness entered the system space and found the ninjutsu scrolls stored in his backpack. Currently, he had collected 12 ninjutsu scrolls. Today, he wanted to unlock all these scrolls and try to gain 1 or 2 more skills, preferably medical ninjutsu or genjutsu. 10 consecutive ninjutsu scrolls, open. The ninjutsu scrolls in the backpack emitted a dazzling light and then turned into fragments of ninjutsu in front of Charles the next second. Ding! Congratulations on acquiring Lightning Release, Thunderbolt, 1 ninjutsu fragment. Ding! Congratulations on acquiring Come and Go Shuriken, 4 ninjutsu fragments. Ding! Congratulations on acquiring Lightning Flash Sword, 1 ninjutsu fragment. Ding! Congratulations on acquiring Wind Release, Air Slice, 1 ninjutsu fragment. Ding! Congratulations on acquiring Wind Release, Cyclone, 1 ninjutsu fragment. Ding! Congratulations on acquiring Fire Release, Will-O-the-Wisp Lantern, 1 ninjutsu fragment. Ding! Congratulations on acquiring Earth Release, Earthquake, 3 ninjutsu fragments. Ding! Congratulations on acquiring Water Release, Water Bullet, 1 ninjutsu fragment. Ding! Congratulations on acquiring Come and Go Shuriken, 1 ninjutsu fragment. Ding! Congratulations on acquiring Earth Release, Earthquake, 1 ninjutsu fragment. Seeing the subtitles popping up on the screen and a series of ninjutsu fragment information, Charles collected the fragments and did not immediately check but continued to click on the remaining 2 ninjutsu scrolls. Ding! Congratulations on acquiring Palm Sage Jutsu, Resurrection, 1 fragment. Ding! Congratulations on acquiring Earth Release, Underground Diving Technique, 1 ninjutsu fragment. After using all the ninjutsu scrolls, Charles began to check his gains. It seemed that this time the results of the scroll usage were not very ideal, perhaps because there was no prayer this time. 12 ninjutsu scrolls yielded only 17 ninjutsu fragments. After gathering all the fragments of the ninjutsu scrolls, it became clear that the drop rate was extremely low. It seemed that the next time there was ninja recruitment or treasure chest opening, Charles would need to find a reliable divine being to try his luck. After collecting all the ninjutsu scroll fragments, Charles opened the scroll inventory. At this moment, the displayed skills were Ninjutsu Body Technique, Control LV2 and Ninjutsu Body Technique, Wrath LV1. This time, with the acquisition of 5 fragments of the ninjutsu, Come and Go Shuriken, it was enough to synthesize the basic skill. Without hesitation, Charles clicked on the synthesis button. Ding! Successfully acquired Ninjutsu, Come and Go Shuriken Technique LV1. Ninjutsu, Come and Go Shuriken Technique, shoot a Fuma Shuriken, a large shuriken, forward, exerting twice the force to pierce through the enemy, and return to the owner after reaching the endpoint. Note, you can control the Fuma Shuriken's flying direction at will. Satisfied with the power of the Fuma Shuriken, Charles nodded. However, considering its large size, if it pierced through the enemy, it would result in immediate dismemberment. Considering his own strength, the force of the Fuma Shuriken thrown out might be even greater than that of an ordinary missile. Additionally, with twice the force, Charles thought it could even cut through armor. He wondered if Tony's Mark armor could withstand such an attack. After obtaining the Come and Go Shuriken ninjutsu skill, Charles looked at the second skill that could be synthesized, the Earth Release, Earthquake Technique. With 5 ninjutsu fragments acquired this time, he directly proceeded with the synthesis. Ding! Successfully acquired Earth Release, Earthquake LV1. Earth Release Earthquake, control the ground within a certain range to rupture and lift, causing damage to enemies. The enemies within the attack range will be floated. The more chakra used, the larger the damage area, and the greater the ground fissure caused. At the moment of obtaining the earth release ninjutsu, Charles sensed the change in his chakra. He opened his information and saw that, in addition to fire and lightning, the earth attribute had been added to his chakra attributes. At this point, Charles became a 3-attribute chakra ninja. There was now also an additional Fuma Shuriken in the system store. The acquisition of ninjutsu had increased Charles's benefits. After all, even if the system didn't give him the Fuma Shuriken, he could create it himself in the real world. The only difference was that the shuriken he threw out wouldn't necessarily fly back, nor would it exert twice or more force. Later, looking at the other ninjutsu fragments, they included a ninjutsu equipment skill, as well as wind release, water release, and fire release, each with one skill. Additionally, Charles laid his eyes on the medical ninjutsu, the Palm Sage Jutsu. However, other ninjutsu didn't yield significant results, with only one fragment each. Fortunately, the requirement for fragments for the ninjutsu on the scrolls wasn't as high as the ninja. Starting required between 40 to 100 fragments. Only 5 fragments from the scroll could be used to synthesize a ninjutsu, and for the scroll ninjutsu to be upgraded, only 10 fragments were required for level 2, and 15 fragments for level 3, and so on, with each level requiring an additional 5 fragments. Moreover, the level of the scroll ninjutsu could be raised very high. Charles didn't know how high the gold finger could upgrade, but before his transmigration, he could raise it to level 50. Back then, the Fuma Shuriken might not been able to cut through planets, but it should be no problem to throw out and destroy an aircraft carrier. It was a pity that the current method of obtaining scrolls was very limited. Recently, he had received more through check-ins. Before that, in the 3 years since the scroll function was activated, Charles had only gained 2 skills, one of which had reached level 2, and the other was at level 1. Chapter 135, Testing. Having acquired new ninjutsu, Charles's first move was to experience it in the practice field. His consciousness materialized into the training ground, where he looked at the row of targets dozens of meters away. Summoning Jutsu. In the next second, a gigantic Fuma Shuriken appeared behind Charles. Upon obtaining the ninjutsu, Come and Go Shuriken technique, he also gained proficiency in tool summoning. Tool summoning didn't require as much trouble as animal summoning. A simple hand seal was enough. Ninjutsu, Come and Go Shuriken technique. Charles exerted all his strength to throw the massive Fuma Shuriken in his hand. With a loud whoosh, the Fuma Shuriken spun and flew out. Swish! 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 With Charles's own strength backing it up, the Fuma Shuriken moved at a lightning-fast speed, packed with kinetic energy. It directly pierced through the practice field's target, then shattered the surrounding wall and flew into the distance. Everywhere it passed, whether it was a wall or a huge tree, it was cut off. Finally, it returned with the same force, only stopping when it reached Charles. Charles caught the returning Fuma Shuriken and nodded in satisfaction at the destructive power it had caused. This skill seemed pretty good at the moment. Charles tested the direction of the Fuma Shuriken again, and as expected, it could be controlled very easily. It could strike wherever he wanted, without worrying that the opponent would dodge in advance based on the trajectory. After a few attempts with the Come and Go Shuriken ninjutsu, Charles began to experiment with the newly acquired Earth Release, Earthquake. Charles quickly formed hand seals and slammed the ground, shouting loudly, Earth Release, Earthquake technique. In the next instant, the ground in front of Charles shattered, and countless rocks and earth shot up, causing the enemy to float. Since it was the first time using this ninjutsu, Charles didn't control the output of his own chakra but instead followed the system's recommendation for the release. Therefore, the area of damage caused was not very large, only about 10 square meters. After getting a feel for the release technique of this ninjutsu, Charles started controlling the chakra output of the skill. The first time he released the ninjutsu, the chakra output was too huge, resulting in the failure of the ninjutsu release. This made Charles realize that the newly acquired earth attribute chakra was not as familiar to use as the previous fire and lightning attributes. With each attempt, Charles paid attention to the chakra attribute conversion and the chakra output, and finally, after several attempts, Charles found a point where the ninjutsu was not disrupted and the chakra output was at its maximum. Earth Release, Earthquake technique. Charles clapped his hands on the ground, and a large amount of chakra was released. The entire ground of the practice field trembled instantly, and the next second, the ground directly cracked and lifted. As the ninjutsu was released, the practice field's ground was directly destroyed. Charles discovered that he could not only control the ground lifting but also its sinking. This made Charles feel that this ninjutsu was very similar to the Earth Release, Earth-style wall and its advanced version in Naruto. In the world of Naruto, this ninjutsu was mainly used for assistance, such as digging trenches. However, under the cheat code of the mobile game, this purely supportive skill had gained some offensive capabilities. At this moment, it wasn't just Charles who was practicing. Other summoned ninjas also had the hand seals and releases of these two ninjutsu in their minds. However, they were not like Charles, able to increase their earth attribute chakra. They needed to develop it themselves. While Charles was practicing new ninjutsu, Tony Stark was conducting his experiments in the underground laboratory. On the 11th day, the 37th trial, Tony looked at the intelligent robot next to him and said, "Because I have no choice, you are still working as a part-time firefighter. If you dare to spray me again and I'm not on fire, I'll donate you to the city university." Then Tony looked over at Peter, who was lying down, and said, "Peter, if I'm in any danger, remember to catch me in time, just like before." Peter raised his head, looked at Tony, whose legs and arms were equipped with mechanical skeletons, and said, "Yes, Mr. Stark." After confirming everything, Tony spoke to Jarvis, "All right, this time it should be smooth. Let's start with just 1% of the total thrust. Prepare, 3, 2, 1. With Tony's words, there was a charging sound, and in the next moment, flames immediately jetted out from Tony's feet and palms for propulsion. In an instant, Tony rose into the air. After maintaining his stability, he tried for a few seconds before stopping. "Peter, did you see that? Fantastic!" Peter, who had been lying down, immediately stood up and looked at Tony, who had just floated, with amazement. Flying abilities were extremely rare in the ninja world. Even though some ninjas were powerful, moving mountains and breaking rocks was nothing, but true flight was something very few could achieve. In Peter's eyes, ninjas with the ability to fly were truly scarce. "Mr. Stark, your research abilities are really great." After landing, Tony, upon hearing Peter's praise, proudly said, "I, Tony, am the super genius in this world." Just as he finished speaking, the robot aimed the fire extinguisher at Tony again. Upon hearing the commotion nearby, Tony immediately turned to the robot and said, "Stop aiming that thing at me as if I'm going to catch fire at any moment. Relax, if I really catch fire, then aim it at me. Alright, now adjust the thrust to 25%. 3, 2, 1. This time, the thrust from Tony was even stronger, and more flames spewed out from his limbs, even sparking a lot of sparks. With Tony's slight movements, his position immediately changed, flying towards the parked car beside him. "Shit, I didn't mean to come here." The flames from Tony's feet jetted over the top of the car. Tony lamented, "My car, my car, my car." Upon hearing Tony's exclamation, Peter stepped forward and kicked one of the wheels of the still undamaged red sports car, moving it to another position. "Thank you, Peter." After some adjustments, Tony finally managed to control his flight direction and immediately returned to the testing center, coming to a stop. At the same time, he said, "I can finally fly." After the flight test, Tony began manufacturing other armor components. Chapter 136, Elena Morse. The next day. As the morning sun shone through the window glass into the room, Charles slowly opened his eyes. The first thing he did when he opened his eyes was to check in. Ding! Check-in successful, reward of 30,000 copper coins. Hearing that it was 30,000 copper coins, Charles didn't pay much attention. Currently, he didn't really need this amount. Some time ago, Ginny transferred 10 million into his account, and he hadn't converted it into copper coins yet. Of course, not needing it didn't mean he didn't want it. Charles still hoped for more wealth. After all, several 100 million copper coins might not be enough. After getting up, washing up, and tidying up a bit, Charles walked out of the room and headed downstairs. Because it was a temporary office, he had to pass through the lobby's service desk to get to the dining area. Passing by the service desk at this moment, Charles saw that instead of Umino Irika, who should have been standing at the service desk, there was now a blonde beauty. Charles walked curiously to the service desk and spoke to the woman in front of him, who seemed somewhat familiar. "Who are you?" "Hello, boss, I am Elena Morse." Secretary Ginny arranged for me to take over the reception work at the service desk. Looking at Elena Morse's outstretched hand, Charles shook it gently and then let go. So you are in charge of taking over Amino Irika's work. I'll leave this place to you. After saying that, Charles turned and left the service desk, heading towards the dining area. He sat down at a table in the dining area, and immediately a waiter came over with a menu in hand. Sir, what can I get for you? Charles took the menu handed over by the waiter, glanced briefly at the breakfast page, and then said, a sandwich and a cup of hot milk, please. Thank you. Please wait a moment. The waiter took the menu and walked away. Seeing the sudden addition of people in the office, Charles knew it was Ginny's arrangement. However, Elena Morse at the service desk always felt somewhat familiar. But for the moment, he couldn't remember where he had seen her. Although the appearance of Elena and Barbara Morse was similar, their demeanor and attire were quite different, making it difficult for Charles to overlap the two in his mind. Soon the waiter came over with a tray. Sir, this is your breakfast. Looking at the sandwich and hot milk in front of him, Charles took a bite of the sandwich, which surprisingly tasted good. It was even better than the sandwiches in restaurants. It seemed that Ginny had really put some thought into selecting the staff. Although he hadn't tried other dishes yet, Charles believed that the chef's skills were not low. A sandwich was enough to give him a glimpse of the chef's talent. After finishing breakfast, before Charles could do anything else, the phone rang. Is this Mr. Charles Doyle? I'm Happy, Tony's bodyguard. We have met before. Tony asked me to bring this thing to you, but it seems like your office has changed addresses. At this moment, a truck stopped by the old site of the office, which was being rebuilt. Happy, looking at the sign of Charles's agency, was somewhat surprised. Tony sent me something? All right, I'll come out right away. Upon hearing that it was something from Tony, Charles immediately thought of Mark I. After all, it wasn't the date to deliver the dog food for Parker, and there was no need for Happy to be dispatched for that either. Walking out of the office door, Charles gestured for Happy to stay there. Soon, several workers pushed a trolley with a rectangular box on it that looked like a refrigerator. Happy walked up to Charles and curiously asked, Sir, is your agency under reconstruction? Charles nodded and replied, Yes, Happy. Seeing the workers pushing the box over, Happy said, Tony said the item is assembled and not painted, but he said it had been polished. Happy, please thank Tony for me. Would you like to come in for a drink? Declining Charles's invitation, Happy said, No, Mr. Charles, I'm still on duty. Okay. Charles didn't mind and walked up to the workers. He grabbed the wooden frame on the outside of the box and easily lifted the box, then turned and went into the office. Meanwhile, the three people pushing the cart with the box were somewhat dumbfounded. Others didn't know the weight of the thing, but the three people responsible for handling it were very clear. This thing weighed tons, and when unloading it, they used a hydraulic trailer. It was unbelievable that the man in front of them could just lift it up without any effort. Was he Hercules? Seeing Charles receiving the item, Happy left with the workers. His task was to witness Charles signing for the item. On the service desk side, Barbara, alias Elena, watched Charles walk in with a huge box. She quickly walked out of the service desk and came to Charles's side to help. While appearing to help, Barbara was guessing what exactly Charles was holding. Boss, what is this thing? Do you need me to call a few people to help lift it? Charles smiled and said, This is a figurine, no need for others to help. I can carry it to the room myself. Barbara grabbed the frame and tried to lift it, but found that she couldn't lift it at all. Even with all her strength, there was no lift. She then gave up the idea of helping. Watching Charles Doyle easily carry it upstairs, Barbara made a guess about Charles's strength. Despite being a woman, her strength was not low, and even she couldn't lift it with all her might. This thing was probably not light, it must have weighed at least a ton. However, Barbara didn't know that the box Charles was carrying contained something that weighed several tons. Seeing Charles Doyle's figure disappear in the staircase, Barbara had a guess, a power lifter? Impossible, even a world champion power lifter could only lift around 500 kilograms, and the way Charles just lifted it effortlessly was not something a power lifter could lift. A super warrior? Could it be someone trained by a secret organization? British? Russian? Or some freak from a laboratory? Chapter 137, Infiltration. Barbara at this moment recalled the information about Charles Doyle. Initially, when she took the mission, Coulson brought her a paper file. It was said that there was a malfunction in the system, which led to the loss of Charles Doyle's file. A comprehensive inspection was done, but the reason was not found. The disappearance of Charles Doyle's file from the system was not suspected to be caused by Charles himself. After all, they knew he didn't have that ability. Moreover, the action of simply deleting only one electronic file was too foolish, and the target was too obvious. It didn't seem like the action of someone who had made such a big name in the assassin world. After that incident, the department decided to upgrade the internal network to prevent such incidents from happening again. This time it was only a level 4 file loss, but what if a higher level file had a problem next time? That would be a big issue. Fortunately, Coulson had a backup of Charles Doyle's paper information, but the content of the paper information was not as comprehensive as the online version. Some evaluations and psychological assessments were lost, which had some impact, but not much. However, this loss increased Nick Fury's suspicions. After all, the information of others was not lost, only Charles's was missing, which was unreasonable. Barbara now recalled the information she had seen earlier. She remembered that the file stated that Charles Doyle was originally adopted by an assassin couple. Combined with today's performance, she was really suspicious. Was it possible that Charles Doyle was someone who had come out of a laboratory? But considering that Charles was in New York from a young age, it shouldn't be the result of research from other major countries. After all, they wouldn't establish a laboratory in New York. As for other large companies, if it were the result of a laboratory, it would have been found long ago. Shaking off this whimsical thought, Barbara was still quite satisfied with today's gains. On her first day here, she got new information about the target of the mission super strength. Although she hadn't obtained information about the force behind Charles, as well as the organization represented by the symbol on his headgear, Barbara believed that she would definitely get the information she wanted after a certain period of time. At this time, Charles, carrying the box containing Mark I armor, came to his room. Fortunately, his room was large enough, so there was no worry about not having enough space. In no time, Charles violently dismantled the wooden crate and packaging box outside, revealing the detailed contents inside. A brand new Mark I armor. Placing the armor against the wall, Charles admired the machine. This was the prototype of the Mark armor, the first armor created by Tony Stark. Looking at the newly polished, shimmering silver-white armor, Charles nodded in satisfaction. The Mark I armor looked classic without any coloring. Apart from the power source, Tony had fully equipped the repaired Mark I armor with all the originally equipped weapons, including small missiles. After admiring the Mark I armor, Charles did not store it in his storage space. He treated it as a large figurine and placed it in a corner of the room. This thing didn't have a power source. In Charles's view, it was no different from a figurine. As for whether thieves would come to steal it, Charles wasn't concerned at all. With its weight of tons, it was not something an ordinary person could carry away, especially from his room. However, at this moment, Charles was looking forward to the exhibition hall of his collection in his base. Currently, he only had 2 items in his collection, so it seemed he needed to work harder. Later, Charles took out his phone and dialed Tony Stark's number. At that moment, Tony was in his underground laboratory, working on various equipment components. "Sir, there is a call for you from Charles Doyle." Both Tony and Parker heard the voice of Jarvis. Upon hearing that it was Charles Doyle, Tony immediately stopped what he was doing and said, "Jarvis, put the call through." "Hey, Tony. I have received the Mark I. It's pretty good." Listening to the voice of Charles Doyle, Tony smiled and said, "Charles, Mark I is nothing. When my latest armor is developed, that will be the real cool thing. By then, you will know what the beauty of technology and mechanics combined truly is." Listening to Tony's conceited words, Charles smiled and replied, "Okay, I'll be waiting for your latest technology. Then you can put on the armor and we can have a showdown." Charles also wanted to test the power of Mark II with Tony's reminder. "Bro, you must be kidding. My new armor is definitely not something that human strength can contend with, even with your pet snake AODA. But then, I'll take you for a flight. You can let AODA take me for a ride as well." Although Tony had already conducted a preliminary flight experiment, he couldn't forget the sensory stimulation AODA had given him. He knew the feelings of the two were different. On the other end of the phone, upon hearing Tony mention AODA, Charles also found it interesting. Tony not only made armor but also remembered his blue snake. Okay, let's find an uninhabited desert and experience each other's possession. After a few more words of chit-chat, Charles hung up Tony's call. Clearly, not only did Tony want to experience AODA's extreme speed again, but Charles also wanted to experience the flying ability of the Mark armor. After all, if there was a chance to try out Iron Man's armor, who wouldn't want to? However, Charles was only preparing to give it a try. As a man destined to pilot Uchiha Gundam in the future, the Mark armor was just a toy for him. Unless Tony developed the nano armor, after Mark 50, that would really impress Charles. Thinking about the armor, Charles thought of Scorpion. He wondered if Scorpion, upon seeing Tony's armor and understanding what it was, would try to make one for himself. Thinking of this, Charles touched his chin. He thought it was quite possible. He just didn't know what kind of puppet Scorpion could make after combining the new knowledge. Chapter 138, Parker's Thoughts, Bonus Chapter. Time flies. In the blink of an eye, another half-month had passed, and the date was now August 23rd. In this half-month, Charles had gained various rewards through the system's daily check-in, including Ninjutsu Scroll X2, VIP 3, double rewards, 300 prestige points, 50 delicious ramen, 200 ninja pearls, 200 samsara stones, 300 prestige points Ninjutsu Scroll X2, 200 ninja pearls, 50 delicious ramen, 400 prestige points, 200 ninja pearls, 50,000 copper coins, Ninjutsu Scroll X2, 300 ninja pearls, and 50 delicious ramen. Although during this half-month, Charles did not receive any gold coins or ninja recruitment scrolls, he did obtain quite a few ninjutsu scrolls, totaling up to 6. Apart from the daily check-in rewards, the most important gains were the missions from the Mission Assembly Hall. With the addition of Naruto and S.H.I.E.L.D, Charles's task submissions had significantly increased, although he still couldn't manage to complete 9 tasks every day. Naruto, unable to complete missions independently, formed a team with Uchiha Sasuke to undertake dual-person missions. Meanwhile, Lee and Iruka handled solo missions, and S.H.I.E.L.D primarily focused on studying medical knowledge and human anatomy in this new world. In her spare time, S.H.I.E.L.D would take on 1 or 2 tasks to experience the powers of this world. However, what disappointed them was that neither Iruka, who had been here the longest, nor S.H.I.E.L.D, who had just arrived, had encountered any supernatural ability users. The strongest enemies they had encountered were the old man from Chaste and the 5 fingers of the hand, but even these people were too weak for them. That's why, they didn't take Charles's warning as seriously, especially Iruka, Sasuke, and Lee. During this half-month, they had completed a total of 45 tasks. Knowing that Charles needed a high volume of completed tasks, Iruka and the others selected missions that could be completed within a day. Occasionally, they also took on some smaller bounties, as in the grading system of the Mission Assembly Hall, a $100,000 task and a $1 million task were both considered D-grade tasks. Unfortunately, without involving supernatural powers, it was difficult to raise the mission level. Even eradicating a bandit stronghold in the world of the ninja was only considered a C-grade task in the Naruto universe. Only missions involving ninjas would be classified as B-grade tasks, so only missions involving supernatural abilities would raise the mission level to B-grade here. Out of the 45 tasks, the majority were D-grade, accounting for 35, and there were only 10 C-grade tasks. All 10 of these tasks were missions such as eradicating small gangs, all of which were carefully selected from the High Tables task database by Charles, completely clearing out the large-scale missions. After all, such tasks as annihilating a gang or dismantling a small faction were considered relatively simple tasks for Charles and his team. The tasks related to power struggles were quite rare, often taking a long time to appear. If Charles hadn't connected to the task database, it might have taken an entire year for an assassin to encounter such a mission. Due to the actions of Charles's subordinates, the entire underground forces had gained a further understanding of Charles's strength. The rewards for D-grade tasks were 200 prestige points and 5,000 copper coins. As a result, Charles had gained 6,000 prestige points and 1,500,000 copper coins. The rewards for the 10 C-grade tasks included 5,000 prestige points, 500,000 copper coins, and 10 regular treasure chests. In terms of money, Charles received $21.2 million, accounting for the fact that he would take 20% of the total amount earned. Even so, Charles's income was still very impressive. Reflecting on the gains of the past half-month, Charles opened his system interface and checked his information. Charles Doyle. Age, 21. Occupation, Ninja. VIP level, 3. Attributes, Fire, Lightning, Earth. Secret Scroll, Ninjutsu Body Technique, Protection LV2, provides 90% damage reduction for 4 seconds, note that it cannot reduce fatal damage. Ninjutsu Body Technique, Fury LV1, increases attack power by 6% for 10 seconds. Ninjutsu, Shuriken Coming and Going LV1, shoots a shuriken that bursts with twice the power, piercing through enemies and flying back to the owner after reaching the endpoint. Earth Release, Earthquake LV1, controls the ground within a certain range, causing damage to enemies. Enemies within the attack range will be suspended in the air. The more chakra used, the larger the damage range, and the greater the earth fissure. Ninjas in Possession, Uchiha Sasuke, 2 Tomo Sharingan, Iruka, Rock Lee, 8 Gates, Shizuan, Ninja School Student, Uzumaki Naruto. Skills in Possession, Fire Release, Great Fireball, Lion's Barrage, Chidori, 2 Tomo Sharingan, Shuriken Technique, Barrier Array, Roar of Love, Infinite Dance, Leaf Whirlwind, Meteor Fist, Leaf Gale. Ninjutsu, Poison Mist, Hidden Needle Shot, Swallow Return, Dance of the Pig, Prank with Paint, Shadow Clone, Double Strike, Harem Jutsu. Gold Coins, 6,346. Ninja Recruitment Scrolls, 0. Secret Scrolls, 6. Ninja Pearls, 2,650. Samsara Stones, 23,100. Summoned Beasts, Ninja Dog Legion, Max Level, AODA, Level 40. Divine Artifacts, Inactive. Equipment, Chunin Shuriken, Chunin Headband, Chunin Vest, Chunin Manual, Chunin Necklace, Chunin Ring. Calculating his prestige, the copper coins currently possessed, and the $31.2 million in his bank account, Charles felt that he could add one more summoning beast, the Toad Gamma. With the 10 regular treasure chests, he planned to open them all together. Charles was prepared to improve his strength today, but before opening the chests, he needed to make some preparations. Meanwhile, Tony was in his underground laboratory, having spent 2 months to manufacture all the new armor components. He was currently in the process of suiting up, and as soon as he finished donning all the equipment, he only had to put on his mask. Tony looked towards Parker, who was guarding him, and said, "Parker, I'm going to conduct an armor test, so I won't need your protection for now, especially since you can't fly." As Parker looked at Tony Stark in his armor, he immediately thought of the puppeteers from the Sand Village. They also wore a layer of puppets on themselves, and in a way, it was quite similar to Tony's situation. Chapter 139, Parker's Complaints. Mr. Stark, I hope you can safely return from this test. I really don't want my mission to fail. How about you wait a few more days before testing? It's been almost a month now, and my protection task is about to be completed. Parker had to complain due to Tony Stark's recent harassment. Tony had gone overboard during this time. He was not only working on the new armor but also trying to set up Parker with a girlfriend. Yes, he was trying to set Parker up with a girlfriend. After learning from Parker that he couldn't have his own summoned beasts, Tony started to pay attention to him. Instead of abducting Parker, he wanted to introduce him to a few potential partners. That way, he could have a few kids with extraordinary abilities. With Parker's genes, the children would undoubtedly be incredibly powerful. Unfortunately, in the eyes of Parker, the ninja dog, ordinary dogs were simply not up to par. It was even challenging for him to consider regular dogs as peers. For a powerful ninja dog that could communicate, its only choice was another ninja dog, not ordinary dog breeds. The difference between the two was like that between modern humans and wild people, and there was simply no way to communicate. After hearing Parker's sarcastic comments, Tony felt very helpless. He knew that his previous actions had upset Parker. But who could resist a talking ninja dog with immense power? Parker, trust in my technology. This armor will be the safest equipment. Instead of continuing to chat with Parker, Tony picked up the face mask on the testing table and said, "Jarvis, are you there? What can I do for you, sir?" Securing the face mask, Tony looked at the virtual screen in front of him and said, "Activate the alert display." Understood. Import all selected programs from the system. Yes, sir. Tony scanned the entire underground laboratory. Information was displayed on the virtual panel for everything. Even when he looked at Parker lying to the side, it provided a prompt: Ninja Dog, Parker, extremely high-risk creature. With JARVIS having completed the import of all files, and the travel route ready, Tony said, "Now, commence the virtual tests." The virtual screen on the faceplate displayed the model of the armor. Reset the priority, calibrate the operating conditions. Inspect all control surfaces. Yes, sir. Under JARVIS control, Mark II underwent a test of all its components. Prepare to shut down the power and start data analysis. Let's test this. Check the weather and air traffic control, and start receiving ground signals. With all the data now connected, JARVIS gave a warning: "Sir, I strongly object to this. Numerous data still need to be analyzed." Hearing the warning from his artificial intelligence, Tony said, "JARVIS, sometimes you have to have foresight when doing things. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. After completing the preparations, Tony Stark piloted Mark II armor and took off. It ascended directly from the underground garage and soared into the sky. As Tony left, Parker turned over and muttered to himself, "That annoying guy is finally gone." Tony was screaming all the way in the armor. The flight was incredibly exhilarating. It seems that the control is very smooth. At this moment, a Ferris wheel appeared in front of Tony. He controlled the armor to fly around the Ferris wheel and scanned the information of a child eating ice cream on it through the system. The child, who was licking the ice cream, was surprised to see Iron Man flying in front of him, causing the ice cream to fall from his hand. Tony accelerated and flew away from the Ferris wheel. "Let me see what it's capable of. What is the record of the State Route 71 Blackbird?" J.A.R.V.I.S.S. voice sounded in the armor. "The highest flight record of the State Route 71 Blackbird is 85,000 feet, sir." Looking up at the sky, Tony yelled, "Records are meant to be broken. Let's go." The next moment, Tony controlled his Mark II to fly straight up into the sky. At this point, JARVIS reported Tony's altitude: 50,000 feet, 60,000 feet, 70,000 feet. Meanwhile, Tony shouted, "Higher, higher." Soon, the armor carrying Tony soared to 80,000 feet, then 85,000 feet, and finally stopped at 90,000 feet. Standing in the high sky, Tony Stark looked down at the earth beneath his feet, filled with excitement. The Mark II armor he created broke the record of the State Route 71 Blackbird during its first flight test. Also, due to Charles's reminder, Tony had considered the issue of high-altitude icing during the armor's creation and added a material made of adamantium. After experiencing the high altitude, Tony Stark piloted his armor back to the villa. Standing on the rooftop of the villa, Tony commanded, "Shut down." The next second, JARVIS shut down the system, and Tony fell directly to the ground. He crashed through the roof, then a grand piano, and with no decrease in kinetic energy, he smashed through the ground floor and dropped into the basement, crushing one of Tony's cars. Seeing this scene, Parker covered his eyes with one paw. It was too tragic to look at. However, Parker sensed that Tony inside the armor was not in any life-threatening danger. One robot, who was nearby, saw the falling armor and extinguished the fire. Tony looked up at the robot's firefighting efforts, and finally lay down in frustration and gave up. With the help of JARVIS and Parker, Tony took off the armor and took some ice from the refrigerator to put on his head. Parker followed beside Tony, complaining, "Tony, I did warn you to be careful." Tony kicked a trolley blocking the way and reached the workbench. At this moment, he noticed a package that Pepper Potts had sent 10 days ago. Setting down the ice, he opened the package, which had "Sent by Pepper" written on it. Inside the transparent glass box was the first-generation arc reactor made by Tony. On the arc reactor, there was a line that read, "This thing proves that Tony Stark is a thoughtful person with good intention." Tony looked at the gift, and a slight smile appeared on his lips. On the other side, having finished washing up and getting ready, Charles Doyle sat on the bed. He was ready to draw some rewards today, maybe by opening a box first. Normal boxes could randomly give copper coins, prestige, gold coins, C/B ninja fragments, or summoning scrolls. With his hands clasped together, Charles Doyle chanted, "Vast clouds in the northwest Xiantian, crows landing among the phoenixes. The profound shall change, and the cosmic will save me. Blessings from the old ancestor Hung Jun, please grant me at least one summoning scroll." Normal box, 10 in a row, open. Chapter 140, The Blessing of Luck. The treasure chest emitted a dazzling light, and after a brilliant shimmer, the results of the opening appeared before Charles Doyle. Ding! Obtained 60 gold coins. Ding! Obtained 90 reputation. Ding! Obtained 60 gold coins. Ding! Obtained 1 ninja recruitment scroll. Ding! Obtained a B-rank ninja, Naruto Uzumaki, from Naruto Shippuden, 1 fragment. Ding! Obtained 60 gold coins. Ding! Obtained 5,000 copper coins. Ding! Obtained a C-rank ninja, Shino, from Naruto, 1 fragment. Ding! Obtained 60 gold coins. Ding! Obtained a B-rank ninja, Sakura Harino, from Naruto Shippuden, 1 fragment. Glancing at the screen and quickly assessing the results, Charles's excitement rose when he confirmed the presence of a ninja recruitment scroll among the 10 chests. Yes! He exclaimed. Sure enough, the blessing of luck is with me. Hail the providence of the heavens! Charles then reviewed his latest box opening rewards, noting 3 ninja fragments, 2 of which were of B-rank quality, featuring Naruto Uzumaki and Sakura Harino from Naruto Shippuden. Although they weren't immediately usable, he was pleased with the acquisition. The C-rank fragment was of Shino Aberame, a new addition to his collection. As for when he would be able to collect all the necessary fragments, Charles shook his head, realizing that it would be a long and arduous journey. After checking the coins, he found that he had received 240 gold coins from the 4 openings. Delighted with the results, he felt that the quantity and frequency were remarkable. He could almost buy 1.5 ninja recruitment scrolls with this gain, in addition to the 90 reputation and 5,000 copper coins. Seizing the opportunity provided by his favorable luck, Charles decided to press on, aiming to recruit some powerful ninjas. With 6,606 gold coins displayed on the screen, he didn't hesitate to purchase 9 more ninja recruitment scrolls. Instantly, 1,512 coins were deducted, leaving him with 5,094. Having gathered 10 ninja recruitment scrolls, Charles wasted no time in selecting the guaranteed Tsunade fragment. Ninja recruitment, 10 consecutive draws, go. The whirlpool emblem of the land of whirlpools appeared before him, radiating a peculiar light. After a shimmer, the results of the recruitment also appeared before Charles Doyle. Ding! Obtained 5 fragments of B-rank Tsunade. Ding! Obtained 1 fragment of C-rank Hanabi Hyuga. Ding! Obtained 2 fragments of C-rank Jirobo. Ding! Obtained 1 fragment of B-rank Tsunade. Ding! Obtained 2 fragments of C-rank Irika Umino. Ding! Obtained 1 fragment of C-rank Hanabi Hyuga. Ding! Obtained 2 fragments of B-rank Hinata Hyuga from Naruto Shippuden. Ding! Obtained 1 fragment of B-rank Naruto Uzumaki from Naruto Shippuden. Ding! Obtained 1 fragment of C-rank Naruto Uzumaki. Ding! Obtained 2 fragments of C-rank Niji Hyuga. Charles was ecstatic upon seeing the results displayed. Mostly it was Tsunade's fragments that saw a massive explosion. Not only did they appear twice, but they also directly exploded 5 times in a single recruitment, resulting in 6 fragments in a 10 draw. This filled Charles with confidence that he could gather the necessary fragments to recruit Tsunade successfully. Indeed, at this moment, the blessing of luck was with him, making his recruitment efforts doubly efficient. Looking at the other recruitment results, Charles was quite surprised. Last time, he managed to stir up a hornet's nest of Naruto, and this time it seemed he had poked the Hyuga's den. Hanabi Hyuga, Hinata Hyuga and Niji Hyuga appeared 4 times in just 10 attempts. This 10 consecutive recruitment yielded 17 fragments, with 9 B-rank and 8 C-rank fragments. Although the number of ninja fragments obtained wasn't large, the big Tsunade explosion left Charles very satisfied. Collecting all the ninja fragments he recruited, Charles didn't end his recruitment this time. He wanted to make the most of his lucky streak and continue his efforts. Without the slightest hesitation, he chose to buy 10 more ninja recruitment scrolls, deducting another 1,680 gold coins and leaving him with 3,414. He proceeded with another 10 consecutive recruitment. Ninja recruitment, 10 consecutive draws, go. The whirlpool emblem of the land of whirlpools once again appeared before him, radiating a peculiar light. After a shimmer, the recruitment results also appeared before Charles Doyle. Ding! Obtained 2 fragments of C-rank Ryotachi. Ding. Obtained 1 fragment of C-rank Shizuan. Ding. Obtained 1 fragment of B-rank Hinata Hyuga from Naruto Shippuden. Ding. Obtained 4 fragments of B-rank Tsunade. Ding. Obtained 4 fragments of B-rank Kakashi Hatake as a youth. Ding. Obtained 4 fragments of B-rank Kakashi Hatake as a youth. Ding. Obtained 1 fragment of C-rank Ibiki Marino. Ding. Obtained 2 fragments of C-rank Sakura Harino. Ding. Obtained 1 fragment of C-rank Hinata Hyuga. Ding. Obtained 4 fragments of B-rank Kakashi Hatake as a youth. Finishing the recruitment, Charles glanced at his summoning interface, quickly finding the Tsunade recruitment results among the 10 attempts, once again with a big explosion of 4 fragments. Seeing that it wasn't just 1 fragment, Charles was reassured. This was indeed the moment when the blessing of luck was with him. He dared not delay and looked at the other fragments. He then noticed 3 images of the young Kakashi Hatake, all of them big explosions, totaling 12 fragments. Together with the previous 9 fragments, Kakashi Hatake had broken through to 21 fragments, more than halfway to recruitment. It seemed that Parker's cherished Kakashi Hatake would soon make an appearance. Charles felt that these 2 recruitment attempts were becoming interesting. Counting the fragments from the second 10 consecutive recruitment, he obtained 24 fragments, slightly more than the previous time. Among them were 17 B-rank fragments and 7 C-rank fragments. It seemed that this recruitment was more rewarding than the last one. Except for Tsunade's fragments, which were 2 fewer, there was a large batch of Kakashi's fragments. He wondered what kind of sparks would fly when Sasuke met his younger teacher, Kakashi. Who among the 2 was more formidable at the moment? The successive big explosions left Charles excited. This was the luckiest he had been since starting his ninja recruitment, and he found it unbelievable. Could it be that good fortune was finally smiling upon him? With 3 successive big explosions, Charles was still somewhat concerned. After all, it was unlikely for someone to always be on a lucky streak. But he also realized that he shouldn't miss this opportunity while he was still lucky, as there might be rough times ahead. Not dwelling on it, Charles looked at the plus sign next to the ninja recruitment scroll and purchased another 10 scrolls. This brought his gold coins down to 1,734. Chapter 141, Consecutive Recruitments, Bonus Chapter. Seizing the opportunity while his luck was seemingly at its peak, Charles wasted no time and promptly initiated another ninja recruitment process. Ninja recruitment, 10 draws, go. The familiar whirlpool symbol of the village hidden in the leaves appeared before his eyes once again. After a dazzling display of light, the results of the recruitment were presented to Charles. Ding. Obtained B-rank ninja Hinata Hyuga shards, 2 pieces. Ding. Obtained A-rank ninja Guise shards, 4 pieces. Ding. Obtained C-rank ninja Irika Umino's shards, 2 pieces. Ding. Obtained A-rank ninja Kuratsuka's shards, 4 pieces. Ding. Obtained B-rank ninja Young Tsunade's shards, 5 pieces. Ding. Obtained B-rank ninja Kakashi Hatake, Young, S shards, 4 pieces. Ding. Obtained C-rank ninja Rock Lee's shards, 2 pieces. Ding. Obtained B-rank ninja Tsunade's shards, 4 pieces. Ding. Obtained C-rank ninja Irika Umino's shards, 2 pieces. Ding. Obtained B-rank ninja Tenten's shards, 1 piece. At the first moment of the end of the recruitment, Charles immediately examined the results. He wanted to confirm if his luck was still holding. What caught his eye were 2 portraits of Tsunade, one indicating 5 shards, and the other showing 4. Seeing this result, Charles, who had been sitting cross-legged, stood up in excitement, pumping his fist in the air. This result was truly fantastic. He had hit the jackpot once again, and it was a huge one. He had gathered a total of 19 shards, and the day he would reach 40 shards didn't seem too far away. Thinking about the fact that Tsunade at this stage was still a teenage girl who had never experienced love, Charles's already restless heart was now filled with ripples of emotion. After inspecting the details of Tsunade's shards, Charles turned his attention to the other recruitment results. He found shards of Hinata Hyuga, Guy, Young Kakashi, and Kuratsuka. It was not just Tsunade's shards that had brought him fortune, the other recruitment results were also remarkable. Indeed, his lucky streak had not waned, if anything, it had only grown stronger. In this 10-draw recruitment, he obtained a total of 29 shards, including a remarkable 8 shards of A-rank ninjas, 16 shards of B-rank ninjas, and a minimum of 5 shards of C-rank ninjas. This was the most fruitful of the 3 tendro recruitments Charles had made this day. A-rank and B-rank shards kept pouring in, while C-rank shards appeared only 3 times, a favorable outcome. He decided to collect all the shards he had recruited. The recruitment screen still displayed the interface of the ninja recruitment, with Tsunade donning her battle attire, her hair styled in twin ponytails, as if running. Glancing at the screen displaying Tsunade, Charles then looked at the 0 next to the ninja recruitment scrolls and the 1734 in the gold coin column. Charles clenched his teeth and stomped his foot, thinking, money comes and goes, I'll earn more when I run out. With resolve, he clicked to purchase more ninja recruitment scrolls, spending another 1,680 gold coins. He now had an additional 10 scrolls, but his gold coin count had plummeted to 54. With this, Charles's gold coins had once again dropped to double digits. Having made the purchase, Charles harbored no regrets or hesitation. Riding the wave of his extraordinary luck, he decided to use up all the recruitment scrolls. Ninja recruitment, 10 draws, go. As the brilliance flickered, the results of the 4th tendro recruitment appeared before Charles's eyes. Ding! Obtained A-rank ninja Kuratsuka's shards, 4 pieces. Ding! Obtained C-rank ninja Ryotsurugi's shards, 2 pieces. Ding! Obtained C-rank ninja Hotaru's shards, 1 piece. Ding! Obtained C-rank ninja Shizuan's shards, 1 piece. Ding! Obtained B-rank ninja Hinata Hyuga, Hurricane Chronicles, S shards, 2 pieces. Ding! Obtained B-rank ninja Tsunade's shards, 4 pieces. Ding! Obtained C-rank ninja Ryotsurugi's shards, 2 pieces. Ding! Obtained C-rank ninja Naruto Uzumaki, Ninja Academy student, S shards, 2 pieces. Ding! Obtained C-rank ninja Sakura Harano's shards, 1 piece. Ding! Obtained B-rank ninja Tsunade's shards, 5 pieces. At the sight of the final recruitment results, Charles quickly examined them. The first row did not contain Tsunade, causing his heart to skip a beat. He then turned his attention to the second row. Surprisingly, 2 Tsunades appeared in the second row in quick succession, one with 4 shards and the other with 5 shards. It was another great harvest, a total of 9 shards. This outstanding result filled Charles with immense excitement. He had hit the jackpot once again, collecting a total of 28 shards of Tsunade. With over half the required 40 shards of the B-rank Tsunade gained, she was within reach. Moreover, this version of Tsunade, one of the 3 Sunin, possessed the strength of a newly promoted Jonin. Despite being a B-rank ninja, she could easily be seen as a Jonin-level powerhouse, especially considering that this version of Tsunade had not yet been afflicted with the hemophobia, making her a perfect combatant. With Tsunade's shards secured, Charles meticulously examined the other recruitment results. It began with the A-rank Kuratsuka from Naruto Next Generations, followed by 3 consecutive C-rank ninja shards, Ryotsurugi, Hotaru, and Shizuan. After that came the B-rank Hinata Hyuga from Naruto, Hurricane Chronicles, followed by 3 more C-rank ninja shards, Ryotsurugi, Naruto Uzumaki, Ninja Academy student, and Sakura Harano. Upon seeing these results, Charles's mouth twitched slightly. Fortunately, he was out of gold coins, so there was no way for him to continue recruiting. Observing the significant gain of C-rank ninja shards, Charles concluded that his extraordinary luck had nearly been exhausted. The last appearance of the Tsunade should be the final blessing from the Lord of the Heavenly Deo. With no more coins left to spend, there was no point in further attempts at recruitment. Finally, Charles tallied the results of the 4th tendro recruitment. He had acquired a total of 24 ninja shards, including 4 A-rank shards, 11 B-rank shards, and 9 C-rank shards, marking the end of his guaranteed results. He then calculated the ninja shards he had gathered so far. Tsunade, one of the 3 Sunin, had 28 shards, young Kakashi had 25 shards, Guy had 17 shards, Kuratsuka had 13 shards, Hinata Hyuga from Naruto, Hurricane Chronicles had 11 shards, and Ryotsurugi had 9 shards. Apart from these, there were some ninja shards with relatively lower counts that Charles temporarily disregarded, as he was unable to recruit them with such small quantities. However, Ryotsurugi, with just 1 more shard needed, would soon meet the recruitment criteria, and Charles would gain access to Wind Chakra, leaving him quite thrilled. Additionally, members of the Konoha, such as Guy and young Kakashi, along with Tsunade, were likely to appear first. It was highly probable that these ninjas would emerge simultaneously. As for Kuratsuki and Hinata, Charles felt that it might take some time before they appeared. After contemplating for a while, he decided not to linger on the recruitment screen any longer. Collecting all the shards, Charles took one last glance at the Tsunade on the recruitment interface and secretly resolved, "Next time, I will definitely bring you into this world." Chapter 142, Achievement Reward. Exiting the ninja recruitment interface, Charles hadn't even had the chance to sigh when a sudden notification caught his attention. Ding! Congratulations to Charles Doyle for achieving the 100 Ninja Recruitment Achievement. Reward, 1 additional battle slot. Caught off guard by this achievement reward, Charles was momentarily stunned, then burst into joy. Fantastic! Quickly opening his ninja battle slots, Charles noticed that indeed, an additional slot had been added, bringing his total to 6. He no longer had to worry about accommodating the next ninja in his roster for a while. Observing the plus sign on the battle slot, Charles was curious and clicked on it to test whether the requirements had changed due to the new addition. Ding! Would you like to spend 5,000 gold coins to unlock one battle slot? Seeing that it still required 5,000 gold coins to unlock a slot, Charles breathed a sigh of relief, realizing that the rewarded slot did not occupy his current unlocked slots. Dispelling his worries, Charles proceeded to check the details of the reward provided by the system. If there was a 100 ninja recruitment achievement, would there also be achievements for 200 times, 500 times, or even 1,000 times? Charles speculated, wondering if there would be rewards for the number of recruited ninjas. In the original game, players were rewarded based on the number of ninjas they had collected, and with every few ninjas, they would receive rewards. There were also achievements for summoning beasts and ninjutsu scrolls. Although Charles could not confirm whether similar rewards would be available like this one, he was filled with anticipation. Considering his gains for the day, Charles was beyond excited. Today truly was his lucky day, not only with the explosive ninja shards but also with the additional battle slot reward after the recruitment had concluded. It seemed that the only thing he lacked now were items that are needed for recharging. Charles was confident that with just 1 or 2 more 10 consecutive recruitments, he would be able to bring Tsunade into this world. Exiting the system space and gazing at the now pitch-black sky outside the window, Charles came to the window and began pondering. During the past 10 days, Charles had not gone on any missions, but that didn't mean he had done nothing. He had been contemplating one thing: if this world was not just the Marvel Cinematic Universe, did it also possess other supernatural forces? Apart from the high-end powers that were currently beyond his reach, were there other supernatural beings such as werewolves, vampires, and magicians, as well as corresponding supernatural items? For this reason, he had instructed the High Table members to start looking into it during this time. Through High Table's extensive underground network, it was believed that they would soon discover some new and unusual information. After all, supernatural powers were most likely to clash and come into contact with dark forces, such as vampires, or werewolves. On the other side, Tony Stark, who had just finished testing, was currently in front of his computer screen, examining his silver-white armor. He felt that his suit needed some changes. Silver-white didn't quite align with his ideal style. Picking up a glass of chlorophyll from the table, he drank it to alleviate the palladium poisoning symptoms. As he glanced at the reactor on his chest, Tony knew that while it was protecting his life from shrapnel residue entering his heart, whenever he intensified the use of the reactor's energy during his armor trials, it would cause rapid palladium buildup in his body, leading to the toxic symptoms. At present, the effects were manageable, and chlorophyll helped alleviate them. However, Tony wasn't sure if he would frequently use the arc reactor in his chest in the future. Just as he finished drinking the chlorophyll, Tony heard the news broadcast. The Disney concert hall, adorned with a red carpet, is brightly lit with lights and bustling tonight. Tony Stark hosts the 3rd annual charity ball for the Firefighters Family Foundation, held in this grand venue. Tony tilted his head, watching the news on the TV screen, and curiously asked, "Jarvis, did we receive an invitation?" "There's no record of receiving an invitation, sir." The television continued, "The elites of Los Angeles high society are gathered, shining like stars." The organizer of this event, who was not long ago outspoken at a press conference, has since disappeared from the public eye. Just as Tony was toying with Mark II's face mask, he fell into contemplation upon seeing his picture from the press conference on the TV screen. Some say he's been suffering from post-concussion syndrome, bedridden for weeks. We don't know the full story. But seeing him tonight is almost impossible. Initially indifferent, Tony was taken aback by how the news presenter portrayed him, and he immediately removed the mask from his face, visibly displeased. At this moment, Jarvis reminded him, the schematics are complete. Looking at the gold-plated armor being drawn in front of him, Tony remarked, the color scheme is too dazzling, isn't it? It's my mistake. You've always preferred a low-key and modest style. Turning to look at his red, yellow, and black sports car, Tony pondered for a moment before saying, let's add some red like the sports car. Sure, it will complement your low-key image. Meanwhile, Peter, lying on the floor, sneezed, unsure if it was intentional or if he had caught a cold. Tony poured another glass of chlorophyll and drank it while gazing at the newly repainted Mark armor. I love it. Assemble it and apply the paint. Automatic assembly is commencing, estimated to be completed in 5 hours. Tony picked up a watch from the table, checked the time, and said, wait for me, sweetheart. Then, with Peter, he drove his Audi R8 towards the banquet hall. Upon arriving at the Disney concert hall, where the banquet was being held, Tony parked the car and got out, followed by Peter, who jumped out as well, trailing behind Tony. The valet at the banquet noticed their arrival and immediately greeted them, hello, Mr. Stark. Glancing at the pug beside Tony, the valet was momentarily about to mention the no pets policy, but considering Tony's status, he refrained. Tony handed the car keys to the valet and proceeded directly to the banquet hall. As Tony Stark made his entrance, countless people exclaimed, oh my god, it's Tony Stark. He's so handsome. Oh my gosh, is that Tony's pet dog? That attire looks so cool. Meanwhile, Obadiah, who was being interviewed, heard the women's exclamation and had to shift his gaze, immediately noticing Tony Stark's arrival. Chapter 143, Guess. Tony walked through the crowd with Parker and approached Obadiah. What kind of world is this, where the host is not invited? Tony joked. Obadiah wasn't sure why Tony, who had been busy with his research, had come here, but he still smiled and said, look who's here, hey, I didn't expect this. Then, noticing Parker at Tony's feet, he exclaimed, Tony, when did you start loving small animals? You even remember to bring one to the party. Looking at the various media personnel taking photos around them, Tony said, I'll be waiting inside. Without any hesitation, Tony turned to leave. Worried that Tony might use the event to announce his research findings, Obadiah immediately grabbed Tony's arm and said, hey, listen to me, don't rush, okay? I think I've managed to convince the board. Okay, got it, Tony replied. It was an impulsive move. I'll leave later. Seeing that Tony has calmed down, Obadiah felt much more at ease. Tony, accompanied by Parker, entered the ballroom without any obstacles. None of the party staff or workers dared to approach Tony to tell him that pets were not allowed. Everyone knew Tony was a playboy, so what was the problem with bringing a pet? After all, the party was held in Tony's name. Arriving at the beverage area of the event, Tony spoke to one of the service staff, give me a drink. Phil Coulson, who was considering what to drink, turned around upon hearing the familiar voice. Coulson saw his target this time, Tony Stark. But as his gaze shifted, Coulson's pupils contracted slightly. What did he see? A dog wasn't important, even if it was Tony Stark's pet dog. But the key was the headgear on the dog's forehead that startled him. After all, their director, Nick Fury, had sent their agent, Barbara Morse, to investigate the information about the person carrying this headgear and the significance it represented in Charles's surroundings. But today, he unexpectedly saw a pet dog with this headgear symbol next to Tony Stark. Coulson composed himself, not letting this new information distract him. He was a professional agent and hadn't forgotten his purpose. Mr. Stark, he said. Upon being addressed, Tony turned to face the man before him. I'm Agent Coulson. Tony raised a glass of drink and said, oh, right, you are from which department? Tony remembered Pepper Potts telling him about a department that had come looking for him, but he hadn't remembered the person's or the department's name. Coulson added, Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement and Logistics Division, Department of Homeland Strategic Intervention, or S.H.I.E.L.D. Tony turned and looked down at his drink, saying casually, right, yes, He took a deep breath and had a sip of his drink before saying, "You guys really need to change that name." Carlson maintained a smile on his face but recalled that Charles Doyle had said something similar when they had met. He added, "Yes, everyone says that, including Charles Doyle." Upon hearing the familiar name, Tony Stark raised an eyebrow, and even Parker looked at Carlson. "I know you're going through a tough time right now, but we need to understand the situation. There are still many unknowns, and time might not be enough right now. Let's set up another time to talk. How about meeting at Stark Industries on the 24th at 7 p.m. Upon hearing the agent's words, Tony had initially intended to find an excuse to leave. He had already spotted his assistant, Pepper Potts. However, upon hearing the mention of Charles Doyle's name, Tony decided to chat a little more with the agent. "Charles Doyle? Have you already gone to find him?" Carlson, obviously expecting Tony's interest to be piqued by the name, continued, "Yes, I specially went to see Charles Doyle and learned about the entire process of rescuing you." Upon hearing the agent's words, Tony obviously didn't fully believe it and responded dismissively, "If you already know the whole story from someone else, why come to me?" Despite Tony Stark's retort, Carlson maintained his smile and calmly said, "Mr. Stark, after all, this Charles Doyle isn't exactly a positive figure. Our department can't just listen to one side, so there are some details I need to discuss with you." Upon hearing Carlson badmouth his friend, Tony lost interest in further conversation. Through Carlson's words, Tony understood that he probably didn't have any real information, so he said, "Okay, do as you please. I need to find my assistant now." After speaking, Tony put down his drink, and without any hesitation, walked toward Pepper Potts in the dance floor. As Tony left, Carlson's gaze fell completely on the dog. He was very curious about why this pet dog had come to Tony's side. Even attending such a party, Tony had it by his side. Did Tony know the meaning of the emblem on the dog's forehead? Was it possible that even Tony Stark had joined this organization? Or was this dog with the special emblem tasked with monitoring Tony Stark? It wasn't that Carlson was being too imaginative, but their profession required bold assumptions and careful verification. And often, the real results aligned with their bold assumptions. However, what Carlson didn't know was that Tony did know about the emblem on Parker's head. After nearly a month, there was no way Tony hadn't noticed it. He had been curious and asked Parker about the meaning of the emblem. Parker's response was that not all dogs were called ninja dogs. Only those with the emblem were true ninja dogs, possessing the ability to speak and other corresponding skills. Only those with the emblem can be referred to as ninjas. This made Tony curious about why he hadn't seen the emblem on Charles Doyle. Parker explained that Charles Doyle also had such an emblem, but Tony just hadn't seen it. Chapter 144, Anger. Tony learned at the charity event that his company had not stopped international arms sales as he had announced, but was still engaged in the sales of weapons. Upon hearing the news, Tony Stark was furious. He ran outside the event to find Obadiah, only to learn from him that it was Obadiah who had applied to the board to have him banned from working. After receiving this news, Tony was extremely angry and left the charity event, returning to his villa. Meanwhile, Carlson, after seeing Tony Stark leave, immediately contacted Barbara, who was undercover in Charles' agency. Barbara, who was resting in the room at the agency, saw the special message on her phone and immediately knew it was Carlson's request for contact. Barbara walked to the door of the room, gently opened it, and quietly glanced around the corridor to ensure that no one was nearby. After confirming that there was no one in the corridor, Barbara returned to the room and took out a sphere from her backpack. She operated the button on the sphere and then placed it beside her. An invisible magnetic field with a diameter of 1 meter instantly appeared, enveloping Barbara, forming a sphere of magnetic field. The internal voice was unable to transmit to the outside due to the interference of the magnetic field, but it did not affect communication within the magnetic field, including talking and making phone calls. After doing all this, Barbara immediately took out her specially made satellite phone, entered a series of codes, and dialed it. Carlson, who had already returned to the headquarters, saw the call from the Mockingbird marked on his phone and immediately answered it. "Carlson, what's the emergency?" A pet dog appeared by Tony's side, with the same emblem on its forehead as Rock Lee and the others. "Have you found out why such a pet dog with a special emblem appeared by Tony's side? And also, have you investigated the meaning behind the emblem on this pet dog over these days?" As he spoke, Carlson also sent Barbara a photo, which was of the ninja dog, Parker. Listening to Carlson's 2 consecutive questions and seeing the information on her phone, Barbara replied calmly, I haven't been here for long, and I'm not sure what you're referring to about the pet dog. I haven't seen any pets in the office. But because I'm in charge of accepting and registering commission tasks, I have gained some preliminary understanding of this emblem. In the mission scroll, Barbara had also seen the same leaf emblem. Through communication with the 5 people in the office over this period, Barbara discovered that the kid named Uzumaki Naruto was the most easily fooled, and she had extracted a lot of useful information because of it. The emblem on that badge is the symbol of Konoha Village, a hidden ninja village. The person with this emblem is a ninja who graduated from this hidden village, and only those who pass the ninja assessment at the school will be given the badge by the hidden village. This is the information I have learned. As for the photo you sent me, I have just seen it, but I don't know why a dog can wear that ninja emblem as well. Upon hearing Barbara's words, Carlson immediately spoke, Barbara, tomorrow morning's news channel will broadcast the news of Tony attending the firefighter charity event. The news will feature a close-up shot of the pet dog beside Tony. You can take the opportunity to ask around in the office and observe their reactions. Upon hearing Carlson's plan, Barbara thought for less than a second and found the idea worth trying. She replied, Understood, I will quickly find out the ins and outs of the situation and send you all the information I have collected so far. After receiving the latest intelligence from Barbara, Carlson logged into the secure intranet and began downloading the emails transferred by Barbara. Meanwhile, after ending the call, Barbara put away her satellite phone and deactivated the jammer, stowing it in a compartment of her backpack. Barbara was unaware that her actions had already been noticed by her neighbor, S.H.I.E.L.D, who lived next door. They were separated by just a wall, and S.H.I.E.L.D was a high-level ninja. Although her hearing was not comparable to that of Superman, her sense of hearing was exceptionally developed. But just now, the sound of Elena Morse's heartbeat and breathing suddenly disappeared. S.H.I.E.L.D thought that she might have been attacked. She then opened the window and quietly walked along the wall. S.H.I.E.L.D's body hung on the outer wall, and through the window, she noticed Barbara's unusual behavior. Instead of breaking in directly and capturing Barbara, she returned to her room, opened the door, and walked toward Charles's room. At this moment, Charles, who had been excited by the gains, had just calmed himself down when he heard a knock on the door. Opening it, he saw that it was S.H.I.E.L.D and asked curiously, Is there something you need? S.H.I.E.L.D had no intention of talking outside the door and gestured for Charles to enter the room. Seeing this, Charles became even more curious and stepped aside to let S.H.I.E.L.D in. After closing the door, he walked up to S.H.I.E.L.D and asked curiously, What happened? S.H.I.E.L.D described what she had seen and told Charles her speculation. Elena Morse was a spy. Listening to S.H.I.E.L.D's account, Charles's expression turned grim. He knew that spies would infiltrate sooner or later, but he didn't expect it to happen so soon. Moreover, it was not a spy from the other High Elders faction. Judging by the technology they used, it was likely that they were not an ordinary agency like the CIA or FBI. It was probably either Hydra or S.H.I.E.L.D. Suppressing his anger, Charles said, Notify all the ninjas and the adjudicators. We will have a meeting in the combat room downstairs in half an hour. Remember to bring Elena Morse. Yes. S.H.I.E.L.D replied, then left the room to inform the others to gather. Watching S.H.I.E.L.D leave and thinking about the spy lurking around, Charles's heart burned with anger. This was a provocation against him. Regardless of who it was, anyone who provoked him would face his retaliation. Whether it was the High Elders, Hydra, or the so-called S.H.I.E.L.D, he would not rest until he had a satisfactory answer to this matter. Chapter 145, Exposed. On the other side, inside the Triskelion, Carlson had just finished downloading all the information sent by Barbara and began to browse through it one by one. The information highlighted several key points. Firstly, it described how Charles Doyle's strength was beyond the ordinary, possibly exceeding 3 tons, which suggested he might have surpassed the limits of the human body. Secondly, it mentioned that there was a suit of armor in Charles Doyle's room, which, from her observation, possessed a certain degree of lethality. Thirdly, it revealed that the symbol on the headband was the Hidden Leaf Village, a place with a ninja training system, likely situated in some unknown corner of the world and not in this country. Fourthly, it explained that those with the headband were referred to as ninja, with ranks ranging from Genin, Chunin, and Jonin. Among them, Naruto Uzumaki, Sasuke Uchiha, and Rock Lee were all Genin, Irika Umino was a Chunin, while S.H.I.E.L.D was a Jonin. Charles Doyle was also a ninja, but his rank was yet to be determined. Looking at these 5 specially highlighted pieces of information, as well as Charles Doyle's current position in the high table, the scope of his influence, and other details, Coulson went through each one carefully. At this point, Coulson was greatly surprised. It appeared that indeed there was a mysterious force behind Charles Doyle. This force was a hidden ninja village with a mature training system, a sophisticated power rating system, and extraordinary powers. It was worth noting that when they evaluated the abilities of the individual known as Rock Lee previously, they had already determined that his strength far surpassed that of any martial arts master and had classified him as superhuman. Having read through the information, Coulson didn't dare to be negligent. He immediately printed out all the information and then contacted Director Fury, learning that the latter was in his office, and rushed over there. In the meeting room, Charles sat in the main chair, looking at the adjudicators and the various ninjas arriving one after another. Naruto had just finished a day's mission and had barely lain down when he was called. He was still a bit sleepy, but upon seeing the people in the room, he immediately became excited and shouted, "Lord Charles, did you call everyone here for some important mission?" Elena, who appeared in the operations room, was somewhat puzzled. She was just a mission-level person and didn't know why she was called to attend such a meeting. Could she have been exposed? It couldn't be. She had checked her room thoroughly, found no surveillance, and there were no eavesdropping devices. She couldn't figure out why, so she could only accept it for now. By now, all the other personnel had arrived, and Shizuan, responsible for notifying them, was the last to enter, holding a box in her hand. No one knew what was in the box, but Barbara had a bad feeling about it. Shizuan placed the box in front of Charles and stood in the lower queue. The queue was divided into 2 groups, one of which was the ninjas recruited by Charles. The group of ninjas that had arrived amounted to as many as 5 people. The other group was also sizable, mainly composed of Ginny, John Wick, Cross, Wesley, and Elena Morse. Although the other group consisted of 5 people, in reality, there were only 4 adjudicators among them. Charles observed that all the personnel had arrived. With a serious expression, he looked at everyone. A terrifying pressure swept through the room, surprising Shizuan with the sheer amount of chakra Charles Doyle possessed. The other ninjas were also amazed at Charles's power. However, the members from Ginny's group felt as if they were facing a tsunami and an avalanche at the same time. Cold sweat immediately drenched their clothes. As Charles's aura came and went, the terrifying pressure dissipated in an instant. At this point, his voice sounded heavy as he began to speak. "As a leader, I consider myself quite fair to my subordinates. But there are 2 kinds of people that I can't tolerate. One is a traitor, someone who betrays us from within." Though Charles didn't say what would happen to a discovered traitor, everyone immediately became tense. Charles suddenly brought up the topic, could there be a traitor among them? They glanced at the people from the ninja team, who were all staring at them. This made Ginny, John Wick, and the others feel a chill in their hearts. Could it be that a traitor had infiltrated their ranks? Glancing at everyone's reaction, Charles continued, "The other kind is someone with ulterior motives, a spy lurking by my side. Miss Spy, Elena Morse." Upon hearing her name, Barbara immediately knew she had been exposed, although she wasn't sure why. But she knew she had been exposed. With her intuition, she knew that Charles Doyle wasn't bluffing, but genuinely confirmed that she was a spy. Barbara didn't intend to sit idly by. She immediately leaned forward and attempted to grab Wesley, who was closest to her. She needed a hostage. However, before she could succeed, a figure appeared behind her in an instant and pressed her to the ground. The one who acted was none other than Rock Lee. Barbara still tried to resist, but Rock Lee held her down firmly, preventing any movement. "Bring her here," Charles ordered. From his ninja equipment pouch, Rock Lee retrieved a hemp rope and swiftly bound Elena securely, then presented her to Charles Doyle. Gazing at Elena Morse in front of him, Charles opened the box that Shizuan had brought, revealing a satellite phone and a device to block signals. Seeing the 2 items in front of her, Barbara realized completely why she had been exposed. Yet she still couldn't understand how they had found out. Elena Morse, or should I say Barbara Morse? During this waiting period, Charles finally remembered who Elena Morse resembled. It was none other than Barbara Morse, the Mockingbird, one of the agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Upon hearing Charles directly call out her name, Barbara Morse's worried heart quickly calmed down. "That's right, I'm a special agent from the Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement and Logistics Division, Barbara Morse. Codename Mockingbird." Chapter 146, Return Gift, Bonus Chapter. Barbara Morse chose to admit of her being a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, not for any other reason but to hope to intimidate Charles Doyle through her identity as a special agent. After all, she had known before that Coulson had already met with Charles and had briefly mentioned their department. She believes that even if he had the intention to kill her, considering her identity, at most, she would only be tortured, unless Charles Doyle didn't want to stay in New York. At this moment, Domino Irica frowned slightly. Others might not understand this organization, but he had received another agent, Coulson, from this organization before. And for a period of time, the office had been under the other side's surveillance, but for some unknown reason, the surveillance was withdrawn after a period of time. At this moment, everyone's expressions were different, all looking at their boss, Charles Doyle. How to resolve this matter primarily depended on their boss's thoughts. Charles leaned back in the chair, adopting a comfortable posture and wearing a smile on his face, and said, "So you're Coulson's colleague." Upon hearing Charles mention Coulson's name, Barbara's heart settled down. It seemed that this time, there would be no real danger. Charles looked at Barbara kneeling in front of him and continued, "However, the result of the matter may be different from what you expected. Irica, take this special agent lady down for execution, send her head to our good old friend, Agent Coulson, and ask him for an explanation." After speaking, Charles threw a business card at Irica, which was Coulson's business card, containing his contact information. At this moment, Barbara, who was kneeling on the ground, heard Charles's words and immediately spoke, "Are you trying to start a war with us by doing this? What's in it for you?" Charles, however, didn't care in the slightest and said, "Madam, espionage is not protected anywhere. Moreover, if you want to know something, why not come openly and honestly? Even though I may not tell you, I won't harm you, will I?" Charles subtly implied Coulson's visit. "If you come to visit me openly and honestly, perhaps I will generously tell you something, but trying to obtain information through espionage is impossible." If Charles weren't aware that this was the Marvel Universe, with many entities he couldn't currently provoke, it would be easy for Charles to transform this spy organization to ruins. Furthermore, even in the Marvel Universe, this so-called S.H.I.E.L.D. was not beyond provocation, even if Nick Fury had a power helper behind him. Irica, on the side, took the business card and directly took Barbara away, without giving her any opportunity to speak. At this moment, the atmosphere on the scene was solemn. Through the past half-month, Uzumaki Naruto had grown a lot through some tasks and didn't make a scene in this situation. In the queue, Ginny's face became very ugly when Barbara was determined to be a spy. After all, this person was chosen by her. When hearing that the other party was a special agent and was taken away for execution by Irica, Ginny had to step out of the queue and speak. "Boss, I was also at fault in this matter. It was my misjudgment of people." Looking at Ginny, who stepped forward to take responsibility for her mistake, Charles had no intention of pursuing it. He instead said, "I've thought about it, the task of accepting the mission commission is still very important. Besides, the office still needs to keep one person to handle emergencies. I'll leave this to Irica. As for the existence of spies, there will definitely be organizations sending people over. When you are recruiting, you should be discerning and do counter-espionage work well." Charles knew that as their organization expanded, there would definitely be some people with ulterior motives, and he couldn't rely on ninjas for everything. Should chefs, waiters, and doormen all be ninjas? That's unrealistic. But he at least wanted to eliminate the existence of spies around him and among the higher UPS. Upon hearing Charles's instructions, everyone nodded in agreement. Ginny, in particular, made a decision in her heart to carefully review the files of the people selected earlier to avoid similar incidents as much as possible, otherwise, it would be a slap in her face. By now, Irica had already beheaded Barbara and put her head in a box, then returned to the operations room. "Lord Charles, I have executed the request as you asked. Tomorrow, I will send someone to deliver the things to Agent Coulson. However, our actions are also a provocation. After receiving the items, the other party may choose to go to war with us." Upon hearing Irica's words, everyone agreed, especially Ginny and the others, who were somewhat worried. They were not like ninjas, with exaggerated abilities and strong physical fitness. They were very aware of the problems they would face when fighting against a national violent agency, especially such a special agent organization. On the contrary, the 5 members of the ninja team didn't care about this so-called special organization. In their eyes, it was just a group of ordinary people. Even if it was a large-scale special organization, it was still just a group of ordinary people. Upon hearing Irika's words, Charles nodded in approval and, after a moment of contemplation, said, "Ginny, mobilize all the congressmen and the mayor we support for administrative lobbying. Direct the direction of charitable funds towards the areas they support, and don't give this damn special organization any chance to make a counter-move." Charles didn't want Nick Fury to directly define him as a terrorist with a piece of lawsuit and close his Continental Hotel with false charges. It was okay to fight, but it needed to be controlled between him and S.H.I.E.L.D. Charles knew that members of Parliament, as well as agencies like CIA, FBI, and the police department, all disliked this not yet renamed S.H.I.E.L.D. And he just needed to prevent them from defining and convicting him. Understood. I will immediately start lobbying the congressmen so that they don't give the other party the opportunity to use official means. Then, Charles briefed the others on the battle plan, including how to counter if the other party used force to attack, and so on. Elsewhere, Coulson, holding the materials in his hands, knocked on Nick Fury's office door. The door opened, and Coulson quickly walked up to Nick Fury and handed him the materials. Nick Fury took the documents and immediately began to look through them, especially focusing on the key parts. Chapter 147, Yinsen's Death. After reading the information in his hand, Nick Fury rubbed his temple and slowly said, "Hidden Leaf Village. It seems that there are extraordinary forces on Earth that we are not aware of. Could Barbara find out the location of this Hidden Leaf Village?" In response to the director's question, Coulson thought for a moment and then said, "It's not easy. Barbara joined too recently. She speculated that even the subordinates under the adjudicators of Charles may not know about this place. Unless Barbara can infiltrate their core team, there is a chance to know the true secrets." As he spoke, Coulson took out two photos, one of Umino Irika and the other of Charles Doyle. As for other ninjas, if they were not children, they were women, so they were not within Coulson's suggested range. Nick Fury looked at the two photos Coulson pulled out, understanding what Coulson meant. The beauty trap, one of the female agent's killer moves. Let Barbara choose for herself, see whom she finds it easier to extract information from. Obviously, the two men didn't know that Barbara had already been beheaded by now, so the beauty trap would not be of any use. Looking at the information on the table, Nick Fury speculated why this hidden superpower organization chose to reveal itself now and what kind of conspiracy they had. Inform Barbara and let her find out the purpose of these ninjas. Their personnel keep appearing around Charles Doyle, there must be a conspiracy. Looking at the 5 ninjas who had gathered, starting from only Umino Irika, Nick Fury didn't believe they had no purpose. If it was just to educate Charles Doyle, it would not be possible to send people one after another, and even send 3 Boy Scouts. Coulson, who received the director's order, didn't linger and left after saying goodbye. Seeing his subordinate leave, Nick looked at the information on the table, organized it, and put it aside. After ensuring that no one would disturb him again, Nick Fury opened his safe and took out a small iron box very seriously. It was as if this box contained some kind of secret. Nick Fury opened the box and took out a small cookie. The cookie was shaped like a bear with various shapes. At this moment, the head of the special agent had a childlike smile on his face. Nick Fury put the taken-out cookie in his mouth and enjoyed it satisfactorily. Only when it was late at night and there was no one to disturb in the office would Nick Fury secretly taste his little cookie. For the sake of his image, this quirk could only be deeply buried in the darkness. Elsewhere, back in his room, after 4 hours of waiting, Tony Stark's latest armor had been made. At this moment, Tony sat on the sofa, installing the armor components on his right arm, while watching the news broadcast in front of him. In the news, Tony saw a war correspondent reporting the plight of Gulmara. A large number of people were displaced, and the place was referred to as the Road to Hell. Tony tightened the armor parts on his right arm with a screwdriver while he watched the news broadcast expressionlessly. The culprit of recent violent incidents is a group of foreign armed forces, referred to by the locals as the Ten Rings. As the name of the Ten Rings appeared and Zayla appeared in the news footage, Tony instantly thought of the dark days he spent in the cave, the days that made him feel humiliated. Tony looked at the person in the footage and murmured, "So you managed to escape last time and I didn't kill you." Then Tony remembered, wasn't Yinsen's hometown in Gulmara? Yinsen. Tony was somewhat worried about the person who had helped him before. He had once wanted to hire him and keep him in New York. But Yinsen was determined to return to his hometown, Gulmara. The TV screen switched. At this moment, a man was being hanged, and there were many refugees weeping below. In the next moment, Tony's eyes widened in anger, unable to remain calm. The man on the screen was none other than the one who had helped him, Yinsen. Tony had already fixed the armor on his arm and, throwing the screwdriver in his hand, he launched a palm strike at the TV. Boom! The TV was blown to pieces, but Tony's rage did not diminish in the slightest. He walked to the bulletproof glass next to the basement door, looked at his reflection on the glass, and launched 3 palm strikes, shattering 3 pieces of bulletproof glass. Looking at his handiwork, Tony took off the armor on his arm. He was going to go to Gulmara to see for himself and avenge Yinsen. Morning arrived quickly. Tony went to his equipment area and, with the help of his mechanical arm, put on the latest Mark III armor and flew directly to Gulmara. At this time in the town of Gulmara, slaughter and looting were taking place. The armed members of the 10 Rings were taking the women and children from the local residents, while the men were being shot. At this moment, a father was calling for his son, and his son was also shouting for his father. Just as the father was about to be shot, Tony descended from the sky in the Mark III armor. The members of the 10 Rings, who were prepared to kill civilians, immediately released the trigger of their assault rifles and bullets poured toward Tony. Ding, ding, dang, dang. After a barrage of bullets, Tony was not actually harmed. He took a step forward and threw a punch, sending the opponent flying. Then he launched palm strikes at the armed men, 1 shot per enemy, quickly eliminating several of them. Even though they used hostages as a threat, with the assistance of J.A.R.V.I.SS targeting, Tony instantly killed them. After dealing with all the armed men, Tony came to gallows, and a palm strike broke the rope holding Yinsen. He then caught Yinsen's body and took off, determined to bring Yinsen back for burial. Just as Tony took off with Yinsen's body, before he could do anything else. Boom! A tank shell hit him directly in the air, and Yinsen's body was turned into pieces by the bombardment. Climbing out of the deep pit on the ground, Tony was now filled with anger. The damn 10 Rings not only killed his friend but also directly blasted his body into pieces. As Tony emerged from the deep pit, another tank shell came flying at him. He dodged it with a quick movement. Facing the tank in front of him, he raised his right arm, and a small missile shot out. Without waiting to see the result, Tony turned around. Boom! A true man never looks back at the explosion. Chapter 148, Task. Tony left Gulmara after dealing with all the armed men on the scene, as well as their Jericho missiles. Zayla, on the other hand, drove a truck with her weapons and ammunition slowly towards the location. She didn't witness Tony's display of power, but she did catch a glimpse of his figure flying away. Meanwhile, at the Triskelion, Carlson had just received a call about a delivery. Curious, he went to the building's entrance and received a square package from a courier. With the caution expected of an agent, Carlson used a device to check for explosives before taking the package back to his office. Asshole! Carlson cursed loudly in his office and smashed a nearby water glass. Upon opening the package, he was faced with a transparent box containing Barbara's head. Carlson hadn't expected Charles to act so decisively upon discovering a spy, let alone resort to such extreme measures. Without hesitation, Carlson immediately reported this information to Nick Fury. He quickly arrived at Nick Fury's office, where the atmosphere was somber. Nick Fury looked at Carlson and asked, "How do you see this matter?" Carlson composed himself a little. He was somewhat saddened by the sacrifice of his colleague. Charles Doyle himself is a dangerous individual, having roamed the dark underworld since childhood. His rapid success upon entering the scene is enough to show that he is not a good person to deal with. Once a spy is exposed, things usually don't end well. The vast majority of them end up sacrificing themselves. Barbara must have been exposed for some reason, and Charles Doyle found out that she was affiliated with us. But for him to dare to do this, he must have some reliance and strength. Upon hearing Carlson's words, Nick Fury slowly uttered, "Hidden Leaf Village." "Yes, Director. The Hidden Leaf Village must be Charles Doyle's trump card, as well as the source of strength for those powerful ninjas. After all, with the support of numerous senators and the power they control, he cannot be unaware of the strength of our organization. Yet, he still demands an explanation from us, indicating that he is not afraid of us. He may not even fear going to war with us, as he seems confident of victory or escape." Listening to Carlson's analysis, Nick Fury's expression turned serious. "Carlson, do you know what you're saying?" Director, I'm just making what I believe to be a reasonable analysis. Obviously, neither the status of the High Table Elders nor the so-called over 80% of the top assassins in America are the capital that he can use to confront us like this. It can only be the Hidden Leaf Village behind him, those ninjas who seem to have broken the limits of the human body one by one, providing him with the support to act this way. Nick Fury nodded in agreement but pondered for a moment before continuing, we haven't found this so-called Hidden Leaf Village yet, and we don't know where they are. We also don't know their scale or manpower. However, it's referred to as a village and it's unlikely to be very large, but if it's a village of tens of thousands of people, all with the strength of Rock Lee, it would be incredibly dangerous. Moreover, Rock Lee is just a genin. There are even stronger Chunin and Jonin. Both of them understood that Charles Doyle's situation wasn't that simple. Although they couldn't determine the exact size of his group, it was certain that the number of people involved was substantial. Unfortunately, the information obtained by Barbara was too limited. Director, let me lead a team to visit. Since Charles Doyle wants an explanation, I also want to have a talk with him. Do you have confidence? Nick Fury asked Coulson seriously. After pondering for a moment, Coulson recalled his previous encounter with Charles and finally said, Director, I trust my judgment. A straightforward and open visit won't provoke him. Looking at Coulson's determined face, Nick Fury nodded and picked up the office phone. Summon Natasha and Barton to my office. Soon, a knock on the door sounded, and Natasha and Barton hurried in. Nick Fury's face was grave and serious as he spoke, Natasha, Barton, I called you both here today because a serious situation has arisen. One of our agents was discovered and killed by the enemy during a mission. The enemy even mailed the agent's head to Coulson, along with a note demanding an explanation. Nick Fury, wearing a black leather coat and a black eye patch, exuded a suppressive aura of darkness. Barton's expression didn't change upon hearing the news. He calmly asked, who was it? Barton knew that Nick Fury had called them here, likely because the deceased agent was a colleague they were familiar with. Barbara Morse. Upon hearing the name, both Natasha and Barton were taken aback. Mockingbird was the only female agent in the agency who could rival Black Widow in skill. She was also Barton's colleague and his ex-girlfriend. Upon learning that his ex-girlfriend had been beheaded, Barton felt a surge of anger in his heart. Although he had found a new partner, she was still someone he had once cared for. Director, issue the operation orders. Should we aim to capture or eliminate the target on sight? Barton asked, still feeling the fiery anger within him. Realizing that he hadn't been clear, Nick Fury then briefed them on the mission's target, Charles Doyle. He instructed them, your mission is to lead a small team responsible for Coulson's safety. If any special circumstances arise, cover Coulson's retreat. After learning about the formidable strength of Charles and his group, Barton realized that they were not ordinary individuals and that they couldn't be dealt with by sending in just any strike team. Therefore, the discussion of capturing or eliminating the target wasn't necessary. However, Barton still harbored deep-seated anger towards Charles Doyle. If given the chance, he wouldn't mind avenging Barbara. Understood, Director. Also, raise the secrecy level of information regarding Charles Doyle from the previous level 4 to level 7. After receiving the Director's orders, Coulson led Natasha, Barton and a team of special operatives to the office of Charles Doyle's agency. As the three of them departed, Nick Fury stood in his office on the top floor of the Triskelion, gazing out the window, his thoughts drifting into the distance. Chapter 149, Alexander Pierce, Bonus Chapter. On the other side. In Alexander Pierce's office, Sitwell handed over a set of information to Pierce. The information was the complete file on Charles and his agency that Barbara had passed on to Coulson. Secretary Pierce, the hand that we were planning to acquire was completely wiped out by Charles and his people. At present, this information is all we have on Charles and his agency. They are an organization with special ways for cultivating superpowers. Currently, neither the S.H.I.E.L.D. nor our own channels have found any information about this so-called Hidden Leaf Village. Alexander Pierce looked at the information in his hand with great interest. He didn't expect to lose the hand only to catch a big fish. Are you confident in recruiting Charles? He asked. Sitwell recalled the information on the file, and then spoke, Mr. Secretary, it's not impossible to recruit him, but he might not be willing to submit to someone else. Based on his past analysis and his rise from a mere assassin to an elder of the High Table, he wants that kind of position to manage an organized group with actual power. Moreover, he is backed by a supernatural force. S.H.I.E.L.'s analysis suggested that in order to recruit Charles, they might have to offer him a high-ranking position, perhaps even the position of a head. Hydra, with the iconic emblem of the Hydra octopus, have many heads, divided into many branches, each with many leaders. As the leader of this branch, Alexander considered S.H.I.E.L.'s analysis and said after some thought, it's not feasible to give him such a position just to recruit him. It's not in our interest. S.H.I.E.L. wasn't surprised by his boss's refusal and continued, Mr. Secretary, we don't actually need to recruit Charles. I've found an interesting point that we can use his strength without needing to recruit him. Pierce immediately became interested when he heard his assistant's words. Tell me about it. Mr. Secretary, Charles's agency accepts any kind of task, even things that won't be accepted in continental hotels, all can be commissioned through his agency. Whether it's finding lost items or destroying an organization, they are willing to take them on. So we don't need to absorb them. We just need to give them some of the tasks we need to accomplish as commissions. Upon hearing his assistant's analysis, Pierce chuckled and then confirmed, they really will pick any tasks. S.H.I.E.L. recalled all the information on the Charles agency and then said, based on the information we have, they don't turn down any tasks. Whether it's destroying the Assassin's Brotherhood, annihilating the Hand, finding Tony Stark, or even some smaller, more bizarre tasks, their agency has never refused and has maintained a 100% completion rate. Upon hearing his assistant's firm words, Pierce laughed, ha ha ha. Great, this is great. It's just like what we control, the Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement and Logistics Division. We don't need to be the director all the time, but being able to command them is enough. S.H.I.E.L., take some time to contact them and try to give them a task to see their reaction. Yes, Secretary Pierce. In this way, besides Nick Fury, Hydra also set its sights on Charles, but the two sides had different approaches. On the other side, on his return journey, Tony Stark was eventually exposed on the radar and, after a fierce battle with a fighter jet, ended up crashing an F-22 Raptor, fortunately without causing any casualties. However, the news about Tony's new armor was still leaked to his good friend, Air Force Colonel Rhodes. Back at his villa, Tony Stark was in the process of removing the exoskeletal arm, disassembling his armor. However, he was discovered by Pepper Potts, who had come to visit him and exclaimed at the bullet marks on the armor. Well, you caught me. Elsewhere. Charles's office. Check-in. Ding. Check-in successful, earning 50 coins. It was a beautiful day, starting with the receipt of coins. After a simple wash-up, Charles went to the dining area downstairs and found that everyone, except for Ginny, was gathered there. What are you all worrying about? There's no need to gather here. If you have your own work, go do it. If you don't have any work, go take on a mission. Since Ginny wasn't there, John Wick took the initiative to speak up. Boss, if they come after us, more people means more strength. I'm planning to call in the remaining high table envoys to guard the office, which can also be of some help. Upon hearing John Wick's words, the others nodded seriously. However, people like Irika remained silent, just quietly looking at Charles. Okay, I understand your concerns, but there's no need to go to such trouble or bring those guards back. Let them continue with their previous work. But since you're all so concerned about this, just follow the deployment I made yesterday and continue your normal work. Looking at John Wick and the others, Charles raised a finger and said, one day, just one day. Today you can all stay in the office. There's an armory inside. Choose the weapons you like, and you can guard here for one day. After a day, if there's no attack, just go about your business. If you're attacked while outside, report to me immediately. After hearing their boss's words, John Wick and the others didn't say much. After all, if they dared to do this, they certainly would have to bear the consequences. But it was the first time they were openly confronting an official spy agency like this, so they were still somewhat nervous. Charles sat in the lobby, watching the latest news, and soon the office door was knocked. Chapter 150, Chapter 150, Confrontation. At this moment, Coulson was driving his car, carrying Hawkeye and Black Widow, with two armored vehicles following behind. While driving, Coulson said, Barton, you'll take the strike team to occupy the high ground and provide external support. If I activate the alarm device on me, you bring the team in for rescue. Barton was wiping his bow and replied, make sure you press the alarm device on you first. I will. Natasha, you'll come with me to enter Charles's agency later. I'll be primarily responsible for communicating with the other side. Upon hearing Coulson's instructions, Natasha responded, understood. During the journey, Barton and Natasha didn't speak much, instead recalled the information provided to them about Charles Doyle. Coulson soon arrived at 71 Forest Hills Avenue, Indiana, Queens, and Barton got off the car with the Special Ops team to secure the area. Once Barton finished his preparations, Coulson slowly drove the vehicle to the entrance of Charles's agency. After parking the car, Coulson looked at the still under construction site next to him and then walked towards the agency with Natasha. The doorman of the agency noticed their approach and proactively opened the door, and then pressed the doorbell, indicating that they had visitors. Coulson didn't find it strange to see 2 additional guards and a doorman at the entrance. It was the previous absence of service personnel that had seemed more suspicious. Walking through the corridor, Coulson and Natasha arrived at the service desk, where they saw Himino Irika. Coulson took out his business card and placed it in front of him before saying, I want to meet your boss, Charles Doyle. Irika, looking at the well-dressed agent and the female agent beside him, picked up the office phone and said, Lord Charles, Agent Coulson is here with a female agent to see you. I understand, got it. Irika hung up the phone and said, Lord Charles is waiting for you in the lounge. Following Irika's gesture, Coulson and Natasha walked towards the lounge. In the lounge, Coulson immediately saw Charles Doyle sitting on the sofa watching the news. Coulson approached Charles, and both he and Natasha sat opposite of him on the sofa. Seeing the familiar faces of Coulson and Black Widow, Charles thought to himself, they've sent their core team. Instead of continuing to watch the news, he turned his gaze to them and calmly asked, What can I do for you? Coulson observed Charles's calm demeanor and gave him a careful look before speaking, Weren't you the one who wanted to have a talk with us? Charles smiled and replied, So you admit that the woman named Elena Morse was a spy you sent? Upon hearing the word spy from Charles, Coulson's expression remained unchanged, but he knew that his statement was not to be taken lightly. He retorted, So you admit that you killed Elena Morse? Kill Morse? Charles laughed, No, no, no. Agent Coulson, you can't make baseless accusations against a good person without evidence. Upon hearing Charles boast about being a good person, Coulson's eye twitched, and he thought to himself, Can you really be considered a good person? Charles Doyle, you should know that this world isn't just about you and your organization, possessing extraordinary powers. Upon hearing Coulson's serious words, Charles thought to himself, Yes, there's definitely more than just me. Whether it's the sorcerers of Camartage, the monks of Kunlun, or the notorious Ten Rings, they are all extraordinary forces. There are even so-called superhumans from different races. Charles's expression didn't change, and he slowly spoke, So, is this your excuse for freely planting spies to pry into other people's secrets? You must be aware of what such behavior implies, right? Or is it, Coulson, that your so-called Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement and Logistics Division is preparing for war? Seeing that Charles wasn't drawn in by his mention of other extraordinary forces but instead questioned whether he was preparing for war, Coulson didn't feel enraged. Instead, he speculated about Charles's reliance. He also knew that Charles likely had a fair amount of knowledge about the extraordinary world. Mr. Charles, our organization is primarily responsible for all extraordinary matters, and you clearly do not fall within the category of ordinary individuals. It's reasonable for us to conduct investigations. Shouldn't you be the one providing me with an explanation? Looking at Coulson, who was arguing with him, Charles knew that a fight was unlikely at this point and began to dodge the issue. Coulson, espionage is not protected by any means. If you want to pursue it, I'll accompany you to the end. But if you're not pursuing it, let's speak frankly and have a good conversation. Upon hearing Charles's refusal to engage in argument, Coulson adjusted his suit and then said, Okay, let's not talk about Elena Morse for now. Upon hearing Coulson's words, Charles directly responded, Coulson, I don't care how you handle things, how you intervene in other places, but here, I won't allow spies. If we find a spy, the consequences won't be any different from the last time. After speaking, Charles made a throat-slitting gesture. Hearing Charles's words, Coulson replied firmly, We don't send spies to any organizations. Natasha, who was watching the two talk, looked up at the ceiling and thought to herself, You two are just rambling. Who would believe that a special agent organization doesn't send spies? However, as an organization responsible for managing such matters, I need to obtain some information from you. I hope you can cooperate. It's not anything particularly crucial and won't involve your practices, techniques, or training systems. Listening to Carlson, Charles thought to himself, I'm afraid that's what you're most interested in. You just know you can't get that information, so you're avoiding the real issues. Charles tapped his finger on the table, creating a rhythm that felt oppressive. As Charles tapped, the atmosphere in the room became solemn. After thinking for a while, Charles spoke, This is Charles' agency.
Thanks for listening.